What we do here is go back.
Hello there, hello there, hello there, everybody. How the devil are we all? Oh, very well, I thank you for asking. Going to be joined by no disrespect TG in just a fucking second. So let's get the shelling out of the way nice and early, shall we? Hello there, YouTube, hello there, Twitch, etc. You can hit the follow button, you can subscribe, you can give subs to the community. This is only on Twitch. YouTube, you can't give me any money on YouTube. YouTube shit. You can subscribe to the channel. You can subscribe with Amazon Prime. You can give subs to the community. You can do bits messages. You can help me out on Patreon. I've got Discord. I've got YouTube. Fuck me. Twitter, although for how long, who knows. Blue Sky, TikTok, etc. My audio is a mess. Why? What? Let's turn me down. Was it just a loudness issue? I don't know.
Gets ready.
Hello there, Helena. How are we?
Hello there, Kevin. I'm doing very well, actually. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Is my audio fucked up?
No, it's loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Fair enough, then.
How have you been?
Yeah, I've been exceptionally well. How have you been?
I had a pretty easy day. Mostly cooking, to be fair. It seems to be that now I'm in my 30s, the most exciting time of the most exciting part of my day is cooking. So,
well, that is fucking tragic. That is very sad, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that your life has descended in that way.
I don't know. Food is really nice, but
true. But I mean, I remember being young and thinking that these were things that were unimportant.
True. It is like a Saturday night, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what I'll cook this evening.
I look forward to sleep now, and that's not good. That's not a good situation at all.
Quite.
Yeah. Anyway, how have you been besides cooking? Have you gone? Has it been all right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really complain. I've got a massive mug of tea now, so.
Well, that's all you need. It's just a massive mug of tea and ongoing genocide. True.
Just take the edge off a bit.
Just a smidge, yeah. Oh God, it's so fucking grim, isn't it? The world is
It is really grim. Yeah. At least we've got a temporary truce now.
Well, have we? Because they've already broken it.
Apparently, the terms of the truce that people weren't allowed to return up north, which is why they started shooting. But I don't think it's. I don't really care about the terms or what's justified morally. But
well, I was about to, like, okay, you can't return to the bit we've already ethnically cleansed. Okay, that doesn't seem like a good plan to me. And oh God, this is so typical of the British media. This annoyed me today. This is what counts as journalism, apparently. Hang on, I should probably show my audience as well, so they fucking see it. There we go. So Ola Guerin, who's not actually a bad journalist by most standards, really, says Israel denies it has violated the truce agreement. Israeli sources tell the BBC. So a criminal denies doing the crime that they obviously just crimed.
It's like we've investigated ourselves and found ourselves to be completely innocent.
That's journalism, is it? That counts as journalism now. Just, okay. Guy with blood all over his hands and body and face and holding a knife saying, I definitely stabbed the bastard. Probably didn't, according to sources close to the bloke who stabbed the bastard.
Boy with chocolate all over face says hands weren't in the chocolate jar.
Exactly. Only face. So that's fine, actually. Yeah.
True.
Hey, Javi Trino, I have not seen you around in a long time. I'll be honest with you, I thought you might have gone and flown to the moon or something. How are you? Everyone going follow Javi, who is a Spanish comrade who is awesome and stuff. Anyway.
Oh, I hope you're having fun with Spanish politics at the moment.
Yeah, fun times. I actually, talking of Israel, how I met Javi was we did a, God almighty, this is so long ago now. We did a Boycott Israel video collaboration thing with several YouTubers back in the day when they were hosting Eurovision.
Oh wow!
And we
said, that is back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. That's how long ago that was. Yeah, Javi's good beans. That's not a fucking saying. That's just words, Kev.
good beans.
A good person. Good beans.
Good person. Yeah.
Anyway, everyone go and follow Javi. He is the leftist loudmouth. Yes. Or can I remember how to say it in Spanish? Oh shit! Izquierdos Canero or something. I can't remember. Fuck!
It's gonna have to be you that does that because I don't know any Spanish.
I don't either. But these channel names in Spanish, and I can't remember what it is. Anyway, thank you, Lord Fruitus, for gifting us up to Habbo. Yes, awesome. Right. So, yes, British journalism is bad, which I suppose would lead us on to. I mean, we haven't discussed an order, but that would seem like a good segue into JOB.
Definitely. I mean, George, we want to watch one of his interviews where he talks about how the Tories broke Britain, how he found out, 7 years later, the Tories broke Britain.
We can do if you want to, if you've got a link to that. Yeah. I mean,
there's a Politics Joe thing that he did. So.
I've just got literally pages of notes on the various chapters from the book, as well as
if you want to go through your notes as well, that sounds perfectly fine as well to me. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what are your initial thoughts, really and truly?
My initial thoughts, and we're talking, by the way, about his book, How They Broke Britain. Right, which I'll just this is just the placeholder I'm putting on screen. Fuck it, I'm not putting the Amazon link. Bollocks to that. Right, it's not a bad book, and he's not wrong. That's, I think, the first thing to write. Yeah. He is right that there are a very small group of cunts who have destroyed this country in pretty significant and possibly irreparable ways. And he actually writes quite convincingly and quite nicely and draws together the different loops in a kind of synoptic fashion, if we want to get a bit academic about it. And that's nice, but there's a couple of issues. Firstly, literally the title, How They Broke Britain, is incorrect, because he is excluding himself from the list of people who have broken Britain, and as a key personality within the media, a person who actively supported Boris Johnson and voted for Boris Johnson to be London Mayor, a person who has frankly had some reactionary takes in the British media over the course of the period in which he's sort of talking about. He is a part of that. It should be How We Broke Britain.
I mean, yeah, it was literally his job, as somebody who commentated on politics for a very, very long time, to hold this government accountable while they were doing the things that he is now decrying, and he did a fucking shit job at it.
True.
He didn't do a job at all. He was busy talking about how Jeremy Corbyn was the head of the Labour Party of Holocaust denial and Brexit betrayal.
Yes, and we'll get onto that, I'm quite sure. But the second main point, and it's summed up in the intro. I've got a quote. I've got a quote. I'm going to read out one stanza, so stick with me for 20 seconds.
Okay.
And this, for me, sums up perfectly the problem that James has, and the thing that a lot of liberals have, is that we've talked about it before. I call it the 2012 syndrome, or I suppose it could be 2010 syndrome, whatever, of thinking that everything was fine before then, and then the Tories came in and fucked it up.
Yeah,
as if it was as if it hasn't been broken for a very long time. And in this quote, I want people to note that the phrase "the last few decades" and then what follows it, because he, I think, understands intrinsically that it has gone on longer, but doesn't seem to put the dots together and actually make that connection to himself. So it's just 2010 onwards, right? He says, so this is in the intro, explaining the book, right? He says, quote, "This book, then, is a charge sheet, a compendium of poor behaviour and poor actors. More importantly, it is an attempt to record and explain the creation of an ecosystem in which dishonesty could flourish and facts wither, where ordinary people, divorced from and entirely subjugated to the levers of power and influence, were fed an almost unleavened diet of deceit, division and distraction. We will see what has happened to the UK over the last few decades, notably since 2010, especially since 2016, and quite spectacularly since 2019, is an unforgivable as it is immense." He's not wrong.
Yeah.
He's not wrong in that is true, but you say last few decades, James, and then curtail yourself to notably 2010, especially 2016 and spectacularly 2019, as if it was fine before then. Before 2010, everything was fine, and then it got fucked up. No.
Yeah.
It was fucked way before then. I mean, literally, this book, the chapters are on individual people, right? So,
Okay.
Chapter 1, Rupert Murdoch, Paul Dacre, Andrew Neil, etc., running down the list. I think we'll probably focus a little bit on the Jeremy Corbyn one, because it was pretty atrocious. But
Oh, is it? Oh, good. There's a whole chapter on Jeremy Corbyn, is there?
there is. It's a spectacular
Oh, no.
one. It's honestly, I've lost quite a bit of respect for James. Anyway, any list of people who have broken Britain is not necessarily pointless, but is redundant without a chapter on Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, yeah. Well, literally, I mean, the whole entire economic system, right? I mean,
Yeah.
unless you include, like, Thatcher, and you include people like Friedman, for example, the people who laid the groundwork for everything that we have at the moment, right? Like, the material nature of everything that was that happens to our country,
Yeah.
to create the environment that these things happened in. I don't think you might not have seen it, but I posted it on TikTok. I posted it on Twitter as well. This bit that where Emily Maitlis was really shocked at this chapter of James O'Brien's book, where he detailed this expose, this study of how, if it wasn't for austerity, the northern towns wouldn't probably have voted as heavily for Brexit as they did, right?
Yeah.
That's probably what swung it, was this austerity, right? And I was like, okay, it's not just austerity though, is it? It's also deindustrialization. It's also the leaving behind of these communities from where they were destroyed by Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
These were mining communities, especially these kind of places in the quote-unquote Red Wall, right? They're one round because of Boris Johnson not looking like other Tories, right? I don't think this... I'm assuming there is not much of an analysis of the way in which Boris Johnson managed to win people over outside of the fact that he said the words "get Brexit done." Am I right in assuming that?
Where is the chapter on him? I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. Where is... Hang on a minute. Boris Johnson. Yeah, no, he doesn't actually, no. He basically, the most of that chapter is a list of weird things that Johnson made up about the EU when he worked for the Telegraph. It goes through a little bit about his childhood and how he became formed as a kind of freak, which is actually quite interesting, because I think he has an insight into that, because he's also a public school boy.
He is indeed, yeah.
And how it basically creates psychopaths. It basically creates people with that are completely devoid of, like, humanity. It beats it out of them from an early age. And you can tell that with people like Farage and people like Boris Johnson and David Cameron and fucking George Osborne and all the other cunts. Yeah. And also there's a really weird bit in that chapter where he kind of dick rides fucking Heseltine for some reason.
Oh, they all dick ride Heseltine. They all dick ride Heseltine.
Because
right?
he was pro-EU, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, somebody shared on Twitter, like, this kind of this pyramid of Tories, and like the acceptable good Tories, Heseltine was included, right? This whole thing about all of the bad Tories didn't even include George Osborne, right? At least James O'Brien goes far enough to conclude that austerity might have been a bad thing, right? But, you know, so many of these people, you know, have actual 2016 syndrome, where they only think that everything got bad because of Brexit and were not bad at all before then. Again, my issue with James O'Brien is that he's only realizing this now, right? He's a kind of outside of the realm of normal people, insofar as he is only seeing this now as a way of criticizing them now that there's no actual opposition to it.
Yeah.
Whereas there are still people to this day who think
Stop
that
it.
David Cameron
Get some
becoming the
help.
Foreign Secretary is the return to normality, is the right wing equivalent of adults being back in the room. When huge parts of this is just David Cameron's fault.
Well, to be fair, on that one point, and it does have to be raised, David Cameron has somewhat, as the new Foreign Secretary, has gone over to Israel and has outflanked Keir Starmer to the left.
He has.
To the left, right? The honest to God, people, people who watch our kind of dual casts regularly will know that our basic comparison is that Keir Starmer is basically 2010 David Cameron. Turns out he's not even that. He's to the right of 2010 David Cameron. Look, the dickhead went over to Israel / Palestine, and it said this, right? It was supposed to, looking over at the West Bank, David Cameron heard about the impact of the settlement of expansions and settler violence. Reports of Palestinian civilians being killed by settlers across the West Bank are appalling. Israel must prevent these acts of violence and hold those responsible to account. Milquetoast, middle of the road bullshit. But even that is to the left of the current Labour Party position.
Yep.
I don't know where to fucking begin with how useless, at best useless, actually damaging Keir Starmer is.
Oh yeah, totally.
He's not.
Did you hear today?
You're supposed to be the leader of the opposition. Oppose, then, you cunt. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Have you heard that they might be rolling back their £28 billion investment on green energy?
Yeah, that's also true. They're not going to hit that target because I think they never intended to. It was always just a bit to get them through the local elections or whatever, you know? Fucking ridiculous.
Absolutely, 100%. But yeah, I mean, the point this has all come out of is this continual 2010 disease that these people get caught up in, right? Because I think that what you kind of have to get an idea of when it comes to the way in which Britain is broken is it's less about individuals, although they do bad things, and it's good that we examine the bad things they individually do. It's the people who put them there. It's the system that puts them there, and it is the kind of insular communities at the top of British politics that essentially create a merry-go-round of individuals who are above democracy, essentially, who have no democratic accountability. And everybody in the right of the Labour Party is also part of that too, right? So if you're going to talk about how people broke Britain, and you're going to include all these people that you absolutely should from the Conservative Party, where's Mandelson, right? Where's Campbell? Where's Blair?
Yeah, no, you're very good points. Exceptionally good points, yes. And actually, you raise... I think a thing that, again, it strikes you as so odd that he's close to being correct without quite being able to put the pieces together, or not having the socioeconomic interest to bother putting the pieces together. Let's be entirely honest, he's a rich man in a very comfortable position.
He studied economics, he should know this stuff as well.
James O'Brien puts together quite well in the book the connections between the kind of special advisor, Tufton Street media, personality type people who will go into politics and then go into Tufton Street and then write an article for the Daily Mail and then blah, blah, blah. And they like you say, it's a kind of carousel of right-wing wankery. And he actually elucidates that quite well in the book, I have to say, at times. Really does shine a light on some of the connections. But the problem he has is when he gets to the Jeremy Corbyn chapter of the book, he seems to forget that ecosystem exists of right-wing wankers who are there to purposefully undermine any progress whatsoever, and just sort of agrees with them because he destroyed Brexit. As if look, what do you want him to fucking do? The election, the referendum happened. If he'd become Prime Minister, it was incumbent upon him to implement that, whether he wanted to or not. Yeah,
it remained lost. I'm sorry, you can't get round there.
Yeah, that's how democracy fucking works, isn't it? I thought this whole thing was about democracy. He literally makes this big point throughout about how they're undermining democracy. You're basically saying the majority of people can go fuck themselves because I disagree. What?
Yeah, exactly. And the only person there who had, at the time, it may not have been well well put across to the electorate, right? But it wasn't a hugely well formulated either. It wasn't entirely formulated because we only had a year before the election to properly formulate what Labour's Brexit plan was at the time. But the only person who at least wanted to have a compromise position on Brexit going into the 2017 election, for example, it was Jeremy Corbyn, right?
Yeah.
The Liberal Democrats wanted to just ignore the referendum. Theresa May was, let's do the hardest possible Brexit that we can do whilst keeping Northern Ireland technically within the single market. And Jeremy Corbyn was like, well, let's stay in the customs union. Let's have a jobs guarantee for jobs first Brexit. We put workers first, right? And I thought that was probably, if you were going to have the least damaging Brexit that you could have, it would be, okay, so, let's at least make sure that we protect the really important bits, which is all the workers' rights that we've adopted as part of EU law, and stay within the customs union to maintain the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah. Well, no, but he literally says, I think his first criticism, as it were, of Corbyn in the chapter is that, quote, he waved through Brexit, unquote.
Yes, because that's what the fucking referendum was for.
But also, he was leader of the opposition. What do you want him to fucking do exactly? That's not... What do you want him to fucking do? How can he stop that? Or why should he feel himself allowed to fucking stop that? The people voted the way they did. I disagree with them wholeheartedly. I think they were fucking wrong. And I think that's panning out rather clearly for everybody. But that's the way they fucking voted. It's not up to you in your fucking ivory tower, in your fucking commentary.
Global media pays studio.
Exactly, yeah. To fucking talk down to the people of Sunderland because you think you're cleverer than them, you prick. That's not okay, James.
No, because whilst the people of Sunderland were crying out for an end to the absolute immiseration of their lives from the Westminster clique that he is now critiquing, he was calling them idiots for being pro-Brexit, right? Yeah. He was the one trying to demean them live on radio because they'd not properly had their positions, things explained to them previously. And also the fact that he was so busy being a rich Londoner, essentially. He had no idea about austerity, what it was doing at the time. His knowledge of the deindustrialization of these areas was patchy at best. And he was busy attacking the opposition to the people and party who'd ruined these people's fucking economies and their lives.
And this is how you can tell he's essentially, first and foremost, an institutionalist, which again would make sense given the material situation he finds himself in. He's a public school boy with things to lose. He gets a lot out of the current situation, even though his current niche is being opposed to the quote-unquote majority right now, right? Or the power base right now. He says, and this is, like I say, he evokes all of this pro-democracy stuff when he's attacking the obviously illegitimate shit that the Tories do, and then says that Jeremy Corbyn shouldn't have become Labour leader because it was against the expressed interest of the majority of the parliamentary Labour Party, forgetting, of course, that the parliamentary Labour Party make up an infinitesimally small percentage of the fucking party. But apparently the PLP, the 300 twats in London get to decide for the entirety of the Labour Party across Great Britain. No, that's not democracy, is it?
And even then, even if you take how our democracy works, how a representative democracy works in entirely at face value, right? Even then, those parliamentary Labour Party representatives only represent the people who voted for them in their constituencies, are people who even voted at the election out of the entire electorate, right? Yeah. They don't even represent even close to anywhere near a majority of the people in the country, let alone in the Labour Party.
Yeah. No, absolutely, quite so, yeah. Okay, should we listen to him again? Not be necessarily wrong, but just be annoyingly kind of almost right.
Yeah, because my assumption is that he'll come up he'll bring up a load of things from the book that then you can realise, and then you'll have your notes to be able to refer back to. That's why I thought might be worth watching.
Yeah,
it's muted.
Of course it is, because I'm an idiot.
Point, but I've given up. I don't know what comes below the bottom of the barrel, Ollie. Is it soil? Grit. He's no centrist. That ideology behind austerity was rank. They genuinely believe, because their lives have been so cosseted and so privileged, that all you need to do to shake somebody out of unemployment is just, hold their feet to the fire a bit or give them a bit of a kick up the backside. And it was horrible. Horrible.
Well, you watched Question Time the other day, didn't you? Did you see Oakenshot going on about disabled people being an opportunity?
A resource.
A resource.
A resource for business to tap into, yeah.
This
that's
isn't
that's her
fucking
exact
shale
wording.
gas. These are human beings. The fuck?
Not to Isabel Oakeshott, they're not.
No,
they are human resources.
Honestly, these people are fucking ghouls. And again, I will give James his credit. He, being a person in the media, when he explains about the kind of Tufton Street connections and stuff, he gives... I mean, they're unsourced quotes, so they could just in theory be made up. But I presume he knows people who knows people, and that he's heard these stories be told in media circles, of the way in which the likes of Oakenshott and those kind of Tufton Street elite cunts talk, that they basically talk about all public spending as being evil. They're essentially the new Argentine president, but thankfully not as powerful. They talk about the state in that way.
Given that his actual degree is in economics, if I remember correctly, he went to LSE. I wonder if he'll actually critique the economics behind what they believe, right? And the main thrust why people on the right specifically hate public spending for two reasons. First of all, they believe it's inefficient, right? They believe in the innate inefficiency of state expenditure because it's not being done by market forces, which is obviously untrue. For anybody who's, engaged in any like a left-wing politics, we don't believe that. But the second thing they believe is that it crowds out private investment. Now, that's also just not even true, empirically. Again, Mazzucato's done good work on this. But it'll be interesting if he brings that up, because they believe that if you just let the private sector do it, it'll be more efficient. And it may well be, right? Yeah. If your entire metric for how well an economy is functioning is, do the markets clear? Is your market dynamic fully Pareto efficient? Because it may well be, but is that the maximum social utility that you can get out of your economy? Yeah. If not, then I would disagree, right? And that's where we differ, and that we actually believe in some level of social utility. And I believe that James O'Brien does. But given his own background and his own knowledge, if he doesn't actually pick up on that, there's a really big misstep. Yeah.
Well, in terms of, again, him nearly being right, he describes in the Rupert Murdoch chapter, which is chapter 1, I suppose quite rightly in a way, given that he has laid the groundworks for Thatcher, that would have been a good jumping off point to talk about Thatcher. Anyway, he uses the phrase vampiric free market economics to describe Rupert Murdoch's economic output.
Does any point, Kev? Yeah. I think I know the answer, but I'm just gonna ask anyway, just in case I'm proven wrong. At any point, does James O'Brien link the fact that Rupert Murdoch backed Blair in '97?
He, I think, vaguely alludes to it in passing, just like he vaguely alludes to the fact that he voted for Boris Johnson. But again, it's very much a kind of a sleight of hand in the way a magician will technically do a thing in front of your face, but he's saying, look over here, don't look at the thing that's the trick, It's
exactly, because this very kind of cancerous free market economics was exactly espoused by Tony Blair. Yeah. Tony Blair was to the right of his own advisors on this shit, right? Do you remember Anthony Giddens literally told Tony Blair that the third way only works if you control the financial sector, and he did the opposite and let the financial sector run even further than they had under Major and Thatcher, which led to the global financial crisis. So him not listening to the people who even told him to move right wing by being even further right than them is what gave us the shitty economy that we have at the moment, outside of austerity as well. But then again, that crash that we had and how bad the crash was here which meant Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, who did the necessary fiscal expansion that we needed to get out of the recession in 2008, which was good. But then because we had to go so far, that gave Cameron the justification to be able to rip the state back as well. So there's so many gigantic failures upon failures upon failures of this ideology. And unless you can, because Blair is a huge part of why we're in the mess that we're in that same vein as well, by removing the Labour Party from its roots and turning it into a middle-class party, by trying to widen the envelope of its electorate. I know it's necessary. It's necessary to win the election, potentially, right? I can understand why it happened, but that's a material analysis rather than a justification.
True, but have you considered Red Team good?
Red Team is good, true. Red Team good.
That is the actual mathematics inside James O'Brien's head. Red Team good, so shut up and just accept it, loser. Thank you, Dal, for resubscribing with Prime, and thank you, Wave Restoring, for gifting us up to Mamoof. Much love to you. Don't forget,
thank you. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, go on.
And thank you, Granddude, for resubscribing with Prime as well and throwing your Bezos bucks my way this month.
Exactly. And together with our Bezos books, we will also create a needless vanity project spaceship. Fuck it, let's go.
We'll blow up $15 million worth of rocket fuel to eat floaty skittles for 15 minutes.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to do an Elon Musk and launch a car into space because apparently I didn't learn the lessons of the French Revolution. Dickhead. Anyway, not that I'm saying that that Louis fucking launched a car into space. That would have been technologically miraculous at the time. I meant more the profligate spending while people are suffering in poverty. Anyway.
True.
Don't forget you can give money in the form of bits and subscriptions to me and also to No Justice MTG, and you can also give her money on YouTube, but you can't to me because I'm so fucking radical.
No, you're too edgy for YouTube.
I am. I should just be like fucking Stephen Crowder and just do some domestic abuse against my pregnant wife and still be monetized.
Yep.
Anyway.
What austerity did. You can say what you like about Boris Johnson. He is a brilliant liar. He is a world-class...
No, he isn't. Are you fucking joking? No, he isn't. Just because he's posh. And actually, this is another thing that comes through in the book. Apologies for being poor Andy already. But he has a kind of, again, as a posh lad, has this affinity for poshness that is just not okay. He says in one of the bits, talking about Andrew Neil's, the kind of racism that Andrew Neil allowed in The Spectator as the editor there. He said, there is a racism, albeit of the patrician kind, that you find in Andrew Neil's Spectator. As if posh racism's fine. It's that kind of low, it's common worse, Tommy Robinson racism that's bad. What?
I mean, it's worse, right? Because the Tommy Robinson racism comes from, like, the Boris Johnson racism, right? Yeah. Again, as Carlo always said, right? Racism was something that was dispersed through like elite academics, through like scientific racism, from the top down, not from the bottom up, right? Even and he also Akala mentions that when black people started coming here in the post-war era, in the Windrush generation, they had far more allies in working class communities from class solidarity than they had in the upper echelons of society once to get them fucking deported back to the Caribbean.
Yeah. No, absolutely so. Yes. So the problem that he has is not understanding his own place in relation to this structure. If he'd called it How We Broke Britain and analysed it from that perspective, that he has a concrete interest, albeit an interest he should forego and become a class traitor to his own people, the upper class, right? Or upper middle class, whatever you want to call them. It would have been a very interesting and worthwhile book. It's still interesting. Yeah. It's still kind of fascinating in a way. It's worth a read, albeit I wouldn't give him your money, but that's by the by. It's an interesting read, but it could have been genuinely worthwhile as an analysis because he's a person in those media spheres. He could have been our man on the inside, and he fucking isn't, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Liar. He is absolutely superb at lying. And Cummings kind of rode the tiger. I think he wanted power, but he genuinely saw power as a means to an end. He saw Brexit as a means to an end. He really wants to burn everything down because he thinks he can rebuild it better. Now that is clearly as mad as a box of snakes. We were a country where reputation mattered, where honour was something that people value. These are dishonourable people.
James O'Brien, welcome back to Politics, Joe.
Ollie Dugmore, thank you for having me.
How are you?
Very well indeed. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Good.
Very, very well. For the minority of British people who don't know who you are, how would you describe yourself?
I'm a radio host who more recently has written a few books, but I like to think I'm an entertainer first.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, I'm an entertainer, yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Hanging out with Stuart Lee as well, very rock and roll, very rock and roll at the
exactly.
moment. We're talking because James O'Brien's How They Broke Britain is out now. A rogues gallery.
Yeah, it's a nice description, a sort of charge sheet as well. It's not just...
Well, also, again, without wanting to be too much of a... How did he describe us in the Jeremy Corbyn section of the book?
Looking forward to this.
Yeah, he described people who supported him as delusional, as undergraduate idealists, Dreamers and students.
Oh, student politics. Oh, we're cracking out the bespoke insults.
Yeah, dreamers and students. And, of course, anti-Semites, which is lovely. Thank you, James. Yes. Why is Jeremy Corbyn in this book? He was never in office as any kind of government minister at all. He never ran a newspaper. He's mostly made jam, as far as I can see. Why? How did he break Britain?
By not being the sensible, centrist adults in the room politician to try and, be effective opposition to the Conservative Party.
If the Lib Dems had stopped being cunts and joined with Labour and some centrist-ish old Tory types, you could have gotten an EEA situation and we'd actually be fine. That would have been all right.
Well, exactly.
Actually.
Well, literally, when in fact, when actually at the time, people were too busy trying to depose Corbyn instead. This was the Change UK era of the politics. So the centrists the centrists in government cared more about maintaining the status quo in terms of the political situation in Parliament.
Yeah.
And ousting Jeremy Corbyn and undermining him than they did about preventing hard Brexit, than they did about getting the Tories out, than they did about reversing the economic decline that he talks about being so bad in his book, right? And if he was engaging in a modicum of material analysis, he would know that literally the reason why Corbyn was in the position that he was in is he was the only person opposing the very austerity that he himself is demarcating as one of the root causes of the situation that we're in, both with Brexit and with the economy, right? Yep. And Burnham, Yvette Cooper and Liz Kendall, none of them were anti-austerity, right? Ed Balls ran on an austerity manifesto as Shadow Chancellor in 2015. As Ropes into Eden points out in chat, Darling and Balls both promised to also do austerity if they got elected in 2010. Maybe not as badly, right? But still austerity necessarily, right? Yep. And Ed Balls was even worse in 2015 because they were keeping George Osborne's cuts. And he was the only, he would not be in the position that he was in. We're not for austerity. We're not for the failure of Labour to oppose austerity in the leadership election in 2015 after they'd lost the election being pro-austerity, right? Most people who joined were just people who thought that austerity was bad. And all of the stats show this as well, right? He's got loads of stats in the book, as you've seen from the snippets that I've seen as well. Loads of studies that he cites in terms of why things happen the way that they do. Yet at no point did he bother trying to, or maybe I should look at if my assumptions, right? Essentially what my canons, what they are about who the kind of person who would support Jeremy Corbyn would be. And he's not even bothered trying to look at that. We have studies about the Labour membership that show the Corbynites were just people who thought that austerity was bad. They weren't even younger. They were the same age as like the old Labour members.
No, please.
New ones and old ones, both of these cohorts of the new Labour members and the old Labour members, all supported Corbyn in the leadership election as well. There's very little difference between these two groups.
No, not at all. Dreamers and students. Don't know what you're talking about. That was the only people who supported him. Dreamers and students. Okay?
Yeah, I dream of a world in which people in the northeast are not immiserated, so they're poorer than fucking Mississippi. Right?
Delusional.
That's my dream.
Delusional undergraduate idealists. That's all that's in there. Oh, and cultish was another one as well I mentioned. I don't know if
if you want to call opposition to poverty and homelessness a cult, then fair enough. I talk about it all the fucking time. Maybe I am in an anti-poverty cult. Maybe that's what this is.
You're part of the anti-poverty coalition. It's an outrage. He also says, delightfully, again, because I don't know if he brings him up in this, so I just want to get this off my chest, frankly. He says, he puts Jeremy Corbyn as one of the people, right? So each chapter has, is about an individual. One of them is about Jeremy Corbyn. And he says, in a chapter of a book called How They Destroyed Britain, or How They Broke Britain, about Jeremy Corbyn, that Corbyn's well-evidenced detractors have moved on. In a chapter about Jeremy Corbyn in the book that he just wrote.
Incredible.
I mean, chef's kiss on the blatant hypocrisy, you fucking twat.
Yeah, literally.
Bravo.
Sort of opinion. In fact, there's not that much opinion in it, which is rare for me. It's detail, evidence, receipts of how this crazy thing has happened, or rather how we became a country in which lots of crazy things could happen.
It's a series of portraits, descriptions of malicious actors, shall we say, in British society.
Or just idiots. So, I mean, Liz Truss gets a chapter. So, accidentally malicious as opposed to deliberate.
And I suppose then probably you wouldn't want to describe them as great figures in history either, to coin a phrase.
No, probably not. I mean, that thing I've only recently been reading about great men in history isn't always a compliment, is it? It can just mean people that had a big impact. So there's certainly that.
That's actually true. People like Alexander the Great. Great didn't necessarily mean good. It just meant big, large.
I mean, Adolf Hitler was Time Person of the Year.
True, but I think I would still not call him Adolf the Great. Just as an optics thing. Technically, in a historical sense, that would be correct, but just leave it.
Actually, probably even in a historical context, like he didn't actually do very much, really and truly, right? Because as soon as he tried to do shit, a whole fucking war started, which he lost because he was bad at being a military leader.
Okay, I know what you mean. When you just said he didn't do much, I thought, hang on, no, please don't hurt me, Helena. I don't do this. Especially
when he wasn't successful.
I'm collecting, by the way, at the moment, some receipts because I'm going to do a bit at some point next week about Zionists being Holocaust deniers, because so many of them are. Remarkable shit. So yeah, I was like, please don't be one of those. Please don't do that.
No. I mean, obviously, he did lots of bad things, but he never created the success that he was allegedly supposed to give Germany, in the same way that Alexander the Great conquered lands and created like this greater Macedonian empire. Hitler never did that. He tried to expand into the Sudetenland, and then the Allies went, I'm sorry, mate, about that.
Yeah. You talk about Alexander the Great conquering those lands. It still reminds me of the great Sid Waddell, the darts commentator, and it's amazing commentary, because Sid Waddell was a fantastic guy. He's a working class lad, dead now unfortunately, working class Geordie lad who was educated at Cambridge and stuff. He was a playwright and all sorts. Anyway, and he when Eric Bristow won the darts world championship, he gave this amazing soliloquy about at the age of 27. Alexander the Great created salt tears that there were no more worlds to conquer. Eric Bristow was only 23. And it's so good. It's so good. He's talking about fucking darts, man. He conquered from I suppose Yugoslavia to fucking Pakistan, mad. Or India, technically, yeah. Incredible.
But I don't think there's many people in there who have done much to be proud of. Not that will stop them congratulating themselves on their importance and relevance.
Absolutely not. It begins with Murdoch, it ends with Truss.
Yeah.
If you were writing it today, would Suella Braverman have a chapter in there?
No, not quite. She's more symptom than cause, I think, like a nasty...
See, this
is
Jeremy
Corbyn, though.
Exactly.
Jeremy Corbyn, though, there we go.
This is what I mean. Like, how can you possibly say she's more symptom than cause and not understand that Boris Johnson is more symptom than cause? Okay? Boris Johnson is a simpleton who was allowed to rise to his fucking status because he was never told no, because of a system that doesn't tell rich kids like him no at any point.
No,
right?
No, exactly,
if he'd been born on the council estate I was born on, he'd be dead or fucking in jail, right? Because he's an idiot, an arsehole. He'd be stamped out of you much earlier. How is Suella Braverman less impactful and less a person who broke Britain than Jeremy Corbyn? How?
I mean, and also, what's your metric for cause and effect, right? David Cameron was, could be considered an effect rather than a cause, right? If you want to continue going back, right, you can keep going back and still finding reasons as to why somebody was only there because of the material relations leading them to be like. Thatcher only got elected because of the winter of discontent and the distrust with the union movement because of what happened in that period, which is only then a result of the Barber boom and the Heath government overspending before an oil shock because of the Yom Kippur War, right? There's loads of different reasons as to why the people are just effects, but you have to at least understand that the reason people say things like these, what the Suella does, will have their own poor effects later on.
Yeah, sure.
Rash or
well, thank you for the 10 gifted, Phil.
Oh, nice.
Because she's very much an exemplar of what can happen when the ecosystem has been corrupted. So I use in the introduction, actually, her and Dominic Raab to demonstrate the kind of flotsam and jetsam that has managed.
That's true, actually. Yeah, he mentions it's still one of my favourite bits from the clown car performance of Brexit that the Tories did when Raab became Brexit secretary. And not only did he later resign so he could vote against the deal that he'd negotiated, but during that negotiation came back and said that he had failed previously to understand the importance for British trade to the port of Calais. Oh, sorry, to the port of Dover. Hang on. The most busy port in the country, with one of the biggest connections to another port of any two ports on fucking Earth, in the busiest shipping lane on Earth, and you've only just now realised how important it is. Why are you allowed in public, let alone in fucking office? You're a danger.
I don't know if James brings this up in the book, but I think it's a very funny story of mine. It was reported in Le Monde, I believe it was that during like the first few kind of Brexit negotiations, who was it? Was it Donald Tusk who was negotiating for the EU at the time? Yeah. Was it Michel Barnier?
I think it was Tusk initially, wasn't it? Before he went
back
Tusk
to Poland. Initially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the EU negotiating team basically spent the first few meetings explaining to the UK government's negotiating team how the European Union worked.
Because they've never been told, they've never been interested in the truth. Brexiters aren't interested in the truth. They've got their idea of what they think it is, you know?
A bunch of them weren't even Brexit. Remember, Theresa May was heading these negotiations.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Theresa May was the one, she was a Remainer. Well, it's just because these people are not... Then these people aren't politically engaged. When you're coming from a privileged background, you don't have to be politically engaged. Yeah. You do politics as a fucking hobby. Yeah. It's not something that your life and your material interest has a massive stake in. You do it because you're bored. David Cameron is literally Foreign Secretary right now because he's bored. He even said that he was bored in a post-politics era, and that's the only reason why he's being brought back. Why he isn't interested in coming back is because he's bored. And so they would just, because they had privileged lives where no one's ever told them no, and they have complete, they go through the, posh, preparatory school to posh private school to studying politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford or Cambridge, for example, then immediately becoming a SPAD to becoming a party select candidate to being prime minister, right? Yeah.
It's true.
So they've never had to bother learning how the EU worked because they would always be able to subcontract out somebody else from PricewaterhouseCoopers to do it for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He doesn't bring up specifically the explaining stuff, but he does bring up a particular image, which was at the beginning of the thing when, like you say, Tusk and whoever else, they had like reams of documents, like briefing documents and negotiations and agreements and stuff that were going to be the basis for this negotiation. And he said there was a particular photograph that was taken from inside the room where the one side of the table had all of these documents on them because the EU had prepared and brought like notes and receipts and stuff. And on the other side, David Davis, who was the first Brexit secretary, if you remember, had a notepad and a pen. That was his that was his preparation for those negotiations, was bringing some stationery. I wonder why it didn't go very well.
No, quite. I guess he was. He's been very successful, right?
Yeah.
He's done a really good job of making sure that even Dominic Raab was a step up.
Yeah, true. True. Fucking hell. Unbelievable shit. And yes, David Cameron did also leave his daughter in a pub 255. That is also a thing he did.
He did do that.
To rise to the great offices of state in an almost still incomprehensible or at least unprecedented way. To be Foreign Secretary or to be Home Secretary or to be Deputy Prime Minister, you would previously have to be a...
Although, interestingly, there's only one person who's had all four great offices of state. Ever. The great and late James Callaghan.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Has been president, you twat. Prime Minister, Chancellor, Home Secretary, and Foreign Secretary. Although with the current fucking musical chairs situation in number 10, there could be someone else that gets it eventually. Who knows?
A Michael Heseltine or a Roy Hattersley or and now you can be Suella Braverman or Priti Patel.
See,
Michael fucking Heseltine.
Again, he's sucking off Heseltine. I promise you, I haven't pre-watched this. I just noted it down on my list because I thought, why is he? That's ridiculous. Michael Heseltine was a fucking ghoul. He loved Thatcher. He was so far up her. It was ridiculous. God almighty.
I mean, like Heseltine only really started disagreeing with the Conservative establishment under Major, because Major did dumb shit that even Thatcher wouldn't do.
True, like fuck Edwina.
Yeah, Major was, despite all of the shit that Major did, all of the real fucking economic damage he did. When you look at Black Wednesday privatising the railways, all that kind of malarkey, because John Major is anti-Brexit, right? Yep. All the libs fucking love John Major as well now.
True. Yeah, he gets been whitewashed, doesn't he? All of the bad shit, all of the fact that most of the mines were closed under him. I mean, the ball was set in motion. Was set in motion very much by Thatcher, but he was the final executioner of industrial Britain. That's been whitewashed now because he said, "Oh, Boris Johnson said a bad thing about the EU. That's not cool." Apparently, that lets you off from the economic.
So yeah, literally, that's exactly what lets you off in these eyes. Yeah,
that he engaged in. You know.
Yeah.
When I started writing the book, but when I came up with the idea for the book, I thought Priti Patel would be about as low as we could go. But then up pops Braverman, who does all of these disgusting things for the reasons that are explained in the book. But I think she, as I say, she's more of a consequence of the corruption than a cause of it.
How do you think she'll be remembered then? As a symptom of the corruption of our system, or perhaps as more malign than that?
I hope she's remembered as a low point, but I've given up. I don't know what.
The thing is, why are you talking about her in the past tense? Like she isn't still probably going to be the next Tory leader.
Well, she can be politically relevant for a very long time.
Exactly, yeah. So they're talking about like she's done. No, she's been fired from one position, quite rightly, but far too late. But she's
one position twice.
One position twice, yeah. But she's not. She's not done. It's like fucking liberals have been talking about Donald Trump as if he's in the past. You know he could win next year. That's really not impossible.
Probably will win now.
Well, who knows? Who knows? We'll get on to Joe Biden being fucking awesome later. Stay tuned.
We will do.
Comes below the bottom of the barrel, Ollie. Is it soil? Grit?
Sewage?
Insects? Yeah. I genuinely mean that. I thought Priti Patel had probably taken as low as we could go with all of the stuff that Braverman has since tripled down on, particularly, of course, Rwanda, but with a side order of confiscating tents from homeless people and describing a peaceful protest, an overwhelmingly peaceful protest, as a hate march. So I hope she's remembered as a low point, if she's remembered at all. But, you know, if we've learned anything from the last 7 years of British politics is that whenever you think things can't get any worse, they have a terrible habit of doing precisely that.
On this point then about Flotsam and Jetsam, there's a few competing schools of thought. Ian Hislop on Politics Joe said that he put it down to the purging of the party by Johnson and Cummings, the loss of, I don't know, not my politics, but people like Rory Stewart, Amber Rudd, Gork, Grieve, the list goes on.
Yeah, Gork and Grieve.
Oh my God, no, I hate them. I hate them all. Oh God, they're all awful.
They're the adults in the room, God damn it.
Amber Rudd.
It's almost like you're not about the vibes.
What? Fucking Amber Rudd she's on the fucking board of Centrica, right? The people who are being given public money by the government because to pay for half of our energy bills, right? Through fiscal expansion rather than a proper windfall tax, right? The person who was the one who stood on stage at the debates in 2017 and said, "Judge us on our record," to a chorus of laughter from the debate audience of the 2017 election. Apparently she's one of the good ones, right? All of these people voted for every single fucking austerity measure. Every single one. Every single one.
Adults in the room. La la la.
Yeah, I mean, distinguished.
Thoughtful men.
Distinguished legally as well.
Yes, exactly that.
And more recently, I was reading, I think it was...
Thoughtful democide accessories.
It might have been Aris Roussenos, I think, but he was suggesting that it was actually David Cameron and his reforms to the introduction...
here it was, sorry. This is the picture that James O'Brien... See, the people in chat, they're so fucking resourceful. I gave you a basic bitch description of it and you went and found it. Boom. There we go. See? They've got notes, documents and things. David Davies has got a fucking shit-eating grin, and that is all. Amazing shit. Really.
Like Amber Rudd is literally proof, right? Amber Rudd is literally proof of this, essentially this upper echelon of people who are unaccountable to democracy. Her fingers were in the fucking pies.
Yep.
Right? She had her fingers in the pies the entire fucking time.
Yeah, indeed. Also, was it her? Hang on a second. I don't want to give off the wrong person, but there was someone in the paper today. This story had slipped by me as well, who had essentially used their position to allow their brother to avoid jail for Nancy shit from the Tory cabinet. Hang on 1 second.
He resigned as Home Secretary in 2018 because of the Windrush scandal.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
She was literally his parlay to the Windrush fucking scandal.
Yeah. I know, it was Penny Mordaunt. See, all of these people, they're cut and paste people. Their brother avoided jail for admitting to sending sexually indecent images to a 14-year-old. Sorry,
right,
undercover police officer posing as a 14-year-old.
In Amber Rudd's Wikipedia article, under political controversies, there are six separate subheadings of Windrush scandal, failure to declare conflict of interest over Hinkley Point C, Orgreave, which was deciding not to open an inquiry into the Orgreave events.
Yep.
A plan to compel companies to disclose foreign workers, unlawful detention and deportation of asylum seekers, and racist and misogynistic attacks against Diane Abbott.
Yeah. Going to just point out, for those who don't know, Orgreave was during the miners' strike. This is for Americans. In the miners' strike, where the police on horseback charged into as far as I'm concerned, completely morally and definitely legally allowed mining strikes with batons wielded, and people were hospitalised.
Love it.
Fantastic. And she went, nah, that's fine actually. That's all right. Also, he does actually in the book he brings up Hillsborough a couple of times as well, and the kind of the way in which the media dealt with that and stuff, and that's, I think, actually worthwhile. I'm sort of glad he did.
Oh yeah, Kelvin McKenzie is a absolute fucking poison on our political media.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the obvious go-to in terms of, like, when people bring up, well, what's so bad about the Murdoch press? Look at the way in which they dealt with that. So I think there is a sensibility within James O'Brien that is quite good, but he's also just a fucking lib about it, you know?
Well, let's remember, right? If he's a liberal, he's an idealist, right? So that means that when he's looking at what the Murdoch press does, it's because Rupert Murdoch himself is bad, right? Yeah. He has the bad ideas. He is the head of the Legion of Doom, of the bad people doing bad things because they're bad, rather than a set of material interests. Those same set of material interests that are entirely the same as the people who head global media, for example. All of them have the same financial and political interests as Rupert Murdoch, maybe not quite as climate denially, right? But they're still part of that same structure. Yeah. And unless you can critique the entire media industry for being beholden to capital, because it literally is, then all you're doing is just saying, well, Rupert Murdoch was an evil man in a fucking supervillain costume who wanted to destroy the world because he was evil. Well,
there is obviously a truth to the fact that he wants to make money, but I think James O'Brien makes too much of the idea that Rupert Murdoch, and this is a thing I've seen a lot from, like, media types. They've bought into the bullshit of Rupert Murdoch only being about the Benjamins, so to speak, or being about the money, right? Which, like I say, I've heard several people say, like, there's a famous quote from him back in the 70s, that if he could make as much money or more money being a communist, he'd be that. But that's not true, is it? That's clearly not true. You can tell that from the fact that, like, say, with the Iraq War, I think at the time he owned something like 70-odd newspapers around the world in places like Britain and America and Australia and all the rest of it. And every single one of them wholeheartedly supported the Iraq War, even in places like Britain where it was actually very unpopular and lost him money in advertising. So it's clearly not just about the money. There's a certain amount of ideology there, and there's a certain amount of a kind of wider interest of power, I think that, influence.
So I think that power is what kept him to do that, right? Because his connection to power was Tony Blair, because Rupert Murdoch backs winners. That's what he does, right? And because he had essentially anointed Tony Blair at that point, to be fair, Tony Blair was already winning because of the lead that he had been gifted by Mr. John Smith. That, if he took a line that disagreed with the Labour establishment in 2001, he would have lost his connection to the highest office in the land.
Yeah, probably to an extent, yeah.
And likewise with Bush as well.
True.
Reduction of the process by which you could become a Conservative MP that essentially meant that actually the way they were selecting these people was no longer that rigorous, and that as a result of which you're 10 years downstream of it now, but there aren't actually really any sort of standout figures to point to. I don't know where you stand on it.
I'm not fully across the changes that Cameron made to the entry requirements, but I think probably, and I don't want to critique it if I haven't read it, but I would have thought it was more important to wonder what kind of character was being attracted to the Tory party, and that's when the 2019 intake becomes very pertinent. Obviously, this wouldn't include Braverman, but you think of some of the sort of most bizarre holders of Lee, what's his chops, 30p Lee, is Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party calling for the abandonment of rule of law. That's a really
MP.
good example.
You what, sorry?
He was a Labour MP.
Lee Anderson was?
He defected, didn't he?
I don't think so, no, hang on. I think he might have been a Labour supporter as a younger person, but I don't think he was ever a Labour MP, was he? Let's have a look. Local politics. He was a long-time member of the Labour Party, elected as a councillor in Ashfield District. Blah, 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 blah. Defected to the Conservative Party after... in response to the takeover of Labour by the hard left Momentum. And then
okay. Once the students had taken power, right, they were then too left-wing for... So the fact that, again, Lee Anderson was very happy to be into this sensible centrist Labour Party that James O'Brien loves so much, and that this person he believes is bizarre to be the Conservative Party deputy chair was the member of the very same party that he believes is the adults in the room, compared to the student politics dreamers of the Labour Party, which Lee Anderson left, right? Yeah. It's just this is literally how delusional these centrists have to be to make their ideology fit the political status that we have at the moment, right?
True.
I think what's amusing is that Lee Anderson only won his seat in 2019. Yep. It wasn't even because of Corbyn depressing the vote. It was because I'm not going to say anything on stream because these people are pretty slap happy, but go and check out the district of Ashfield, the independent candidate in 2019. Just look at his history of controversy, quote unquote. It's really funny. But it was a big independent candidate. He's still a councillor in Ashfield Ward, part of the Ashfield Independents. There's actually SK the Crusader has a great video on the Ashfield Independents. It's well worth your time. I highly recommend it. But this independent candidate split the vote and allowed Lee Anderson in 2019.
Also, I didn't know at the age of 36 he was treated for testicular cancer. And I can only imagine he survived cancer because game recognises game. And the cancer went, you know what, as a personal courtesy, we're colleagues here, we're both cancer, I'll fuck off. I think that's we're
allowed to now do a chant of Lee Anderson's only got one ball?
I don't know that he only has one ball. And I don't know how many of his balls may or may not be in the Albert Hall. I love that. And his mother's got the other. Did Hitler have 3 bollocks?
I have no idea.
Mad chance.
Actually, of how low we've been brought to the point where we just sort of chalk that up as another crazy thing rather than an absolutely epochal resignation issue, which it would have been as recently as 5 years ago. So the kind of person that's come in 2019, I don't know that you would have kept out previously people like Braverman, and there were still some good people joining, until 2015. I think that's probably...
Who were these great Tories that were fucking joining? Get over yourself.
When things began to change, and you see the evidence with people like Brendan Clark-Smith and Jonathan Gullis and Lee Anderson of just how desperate they are, really, just how awful you can be and still be selected as a parliamentary candidate.
I struggle with Anderson because I lean towards the tendency to say that he's emblematic or broadly representative of what the modern Conservative Party is, but I almost feels too simplistic. But then you go, well, he's the deputy chairman of the party, and he can say things like "fuck off back to France." He can say things like "let the planes fly," regardless of the law, and the fact that he remains in
Labour
post,
councillor, remember?
It lends more credence to the argument that actually he's not an outlier. He's not fringe, and actually he speaks to something broader within the Conservative Party.
Yeah, so it's well put, because you think initially that Sunak has put him there in order to kind of keep that lot happy while I get on with the business of being a proper Conservative. But the longer it's gone on, the more they seem to be converging on the same ground, or Sunak seems to be tacking towards Lee Anderson, because he is going to try to ignore the laws, or he is going to try at least to render Rwanda a safe country by passing a parliamentary motion that says it's a safe country, even though it's an unsafe country, which is great, you know.
The mayor in Jaws says we'll pass a law the water's safe.
Yeah, exactly that. You sit here, we've done it again. So we've been here 5 minutes. That's 3 examples of things that just should not happen.
Yeah.
Because Britain is broken. We don't clock how extraordinary they are, these events, these moments, these individuals.
Is there a moment for despair then in that place, that we're swamped by examples like that?
Yes, but oddly, since I finished the book and being asked questions about it, and one of the most common questions is either the one about despair or the one about hope, because it's the hope that gets you.
Always.
Of course, they can deal with the despair. The worst bits of it have happened quite recently. So, I mean, there's several starting points, whether it's Murdoch getting hold of the Sun or the News of the World, or the Times, probably more significant, or whether it's Cameron bringing in...
Why is the Times more significant? That's a bit odd.
Well, I do believe that there is probably the most insidious newspaper. Actually, the most insidious newspaper in the UK is the Telegraph.
The Telegraph's atrocious, yeah.
Yeah, the Telegraph is like it's gone full on fashion now, right? It's literally like a fashion newspaper. But the Times also alludes to this really often as well. Actually, transphobia is a really big problem in the Times, even more so than the Telegraph. And because it's the quote-unquote paper of record, but being Murdoch-owned, like, it has this sense of perceived legitimacy to a bunch of the shit that it says, when it should not have the same thing, because it's just the fucking Sun for posh people.
Yeah.
In austerity, or whether it's Brexit itself, or whether it's Johnson. For me, the really bad stuff begins in 2019, not in 19...
Jesus Christ. Yeah, everything was fucking fine before 4 years ago. You twat. You know the fucking economic crash happened in 2008, right?
And even then, like,
not even going to go back that far.
I mean, and even then, so much of the problems that we have now are because Blair and Brown were really bad at like managing the economy for the long term, right?
Yeah.
In that, you know, their priorities were correct in broadly, right? Having a functioning NHS, trying to eliminate things like child poverty. Broadly, what they were trying to do are things that were worth doing, right? But a load of the things that they failed on were like huge problems, letting the financial sector go. Things like PFIs, catastrophically failing on things like housing and community cohesion, for example. These things that they should really had a bigger go on, as well as obviously all of their like myriad foreign policy failures outside of maybe Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
And again, like these all set the stage for what we have right now.
The adults back in the room, yeah. It's all good.
Yeah.
Sorted.
1969, and I've been deriving enormous comfort from the memory of Amber Rudd, of all people, because she resigned twice in what would be...
What? I mean, okay. You know what? There's only so many times you can say you're a fucking lib. Shut up. Do you know what I mean? I think I need that as a fucking soundboard thing, so I can just press it, save my vocal cords.
Described as circumstances of traditional principle. So she resigned the first time because she misled the House of Commons inadvertently, but felt that she had to take individual ministerial responsibility for information, duff information I think she'd been given about something that happened when Theresa May was Home Secretary. And she was brought back into Cabinet and resigned again as Business Secretary, and resigned the whip as well in protest at the purging that Ian Hislop spoke to you about, in protest at what Boris Johnson was doing to the party, which was tearing out people prepared to tell the truth. Everybody knew the truth, except probably Nadine Dorries, but everybody pretended not to understand what he was doing, and she wasn't prepared to do that. And that was in 2019, I think, October, November 2019. So that's 4 years ago, almost to the day. And therefore, you can have hope. You can keep despair at bay by thinking, there's 30 years worth.
I can have hope because Amber Rudd might come back. Honestly, I might need to phone Samaritans.
As long as she declares her conflict of interest for her Centrica shares,
yeah,
it'll be all right, won't we?
This is the leader of the fucking resistance, is it? This lad.
Because again, like he thinks that it's a bunch of malevolent people inserting anti-democratic measures, like surreptitiously, rather than a structure that fails. Right? Again, we're going to come back to this point over and over and over again. But this link between business and politics, which is essentially what lots of this comes down to, like business interests seeping into political life in so much. And half of it is the upper class, posh boys club that is our political class, and the ways in which that they are completely unaccountable and understand it, so take advantage of it. And half of it is all of the people with the money who put them there and help them get there.
Yeah.
For example, and unless he unpicks that, we're only going to get half the story, right? You say, oh well, the IEA, they're these bunch of people who wanted to get Liz Truss as prime minister. They could insert a bunch of their, hyper libertarian disaster capitalist policies. I'm like, okay, why did they do that? What was the set of incentives that got them to do that? And it's of course the fact that the IEA gets loads of money from people in the tobacco industry or in the petrochemical industry, for example, or private healthcare.
Of incremental corruption in the book, but the really bad stuff, the Prime Minister lying to Parliament and then lying about lying to Parliament, and then being rewarded with a column by Paul Dacre at the Daily Mail and a TV show by the fellow that funds GBBs. These events.
The chapter on Paul Dacre is quite good because he does sort of explain what a fucking freak the guy is, and he really is apparently an absolute mental case. And,
I mean, I'm not surprised.
And what was it? Oh yeah, and he apparently his use of the C word, the bad word, that rhymes with hunt, was so regular and so frequent. Getting a dressing down from him was referred to as the vagina monologues, which is actually that's quite a funny little bit from the book. It's nice.
Are extraordinary, but the journey back to normality may not be as long as I thought it would be when I started writing the book.
It's interesting to hear you say that because it feels so far away to talk about a minister resigning for those matters, to say, I inadvertently led the House, which I think was actually the excuse that Johnson parroted at one point to say it was inadvertent. Well, previously, regardless of whether or not it was intentional or not, you would still go.
Yeah.
And that sort of slide... It's funny to hear you talk about it in those terms as recent past, because it is recent, but it feels completely distant.
It feels like centuries ago. It feels might as well be ancient Greece. Well, do you remember Estelle Morris, who resigned as Education Secretary because she didn't think she was very good at the job?
Yeah, it's a level of self-awareness that I think has perhaps gone missing.
There's a country where Jacob Rees-Mogg gets a phone call off Liz Truss and says, do you want to be Secretary of State for Business? He goes, yes, absolutely, I'll do a great job. Whoa! And Dorries again as Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. So we know what...
Again, another brilliant one that she didn't understand how Channel 4 was funded and yet wanted to privatise it.
Literally, my favourite moment isn't quite as, I don't have quite as much gravitas, but it is very, very funny. Was when she was secretary for digital culture, media, and sport, and she describes tennis as being played on pitches, which I thought was really funny.
Well, I mean, look, what's the difference really between a court and a pitch when you think about it? It's semantic. You say potato, I say pitch. Whatever,
What normal looks like, and it's imperfect and it's flawed, and there's always lots and lots of room for improvement. But it wasn't that long ago. Therefore, it can't be that far away.
Do you think it's curable in the Conservative Party, or do you think it's revolution? Do you think it's a new party? Do you think it's complete reform?
I mean, I don't know. The Conservative Party is in such a mess that even now, the new levels of absurdity are being reached. So
they haven't learned anything. That's the thing, right? Literally, to have a minister for common sense to tackle wokery, they haven't learned a fucking thing. They're going to carry on doing the same shit, and it isn't working. They've tried tacking further and further right, and it isn't working.
No.
It's ridiculous.
Well, because the problem is that they've just still not quite grasped the fact, right, that they don't know how to run the economy. Yeah. They never have. They never know how to run the economy, and they continue to screw it up, right?
The worst thing is, it's not that they don't know how to necessarily, although I'm sure they don't, it's that they have no real interest in wanting to. They want to govern, A, to be powerful, and B, to make money for themselves and their friends and their donors.
I mean, I'm going to gonna put my head on the proverbial here,
Okay.
on the chopping block, and say that I actually think Jeremy Hunt does know the basics of how the economy works and does want the economy to run properly. I do think he does want that. Otherwise, if he really cared about his donors and things like that, he would have done loads more tax cuts than he did already. And he's still putting taxes up, technically, in terms of fiscal drag, right? So out of all the people who look ideological in terms of the way that they do things, I think that Jeremy Hunt is the one who's actually putting the needs of the country above his own personal beliefs at this point.
Well, true, but
despite...
I think you've got to bear in mind how he got that job. He was drafted in as a firefighter after Liz Truss went, cut all of the taxes and let's take away all of the support structures and see if this building doesn't fucking collapse. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So I think it's I think maybe he learned something from all of that, but in terms of the Conservative Party, they haven't learned a damn thing.
No. But what's important is to understand that the reason why the Tories are fucked is that they just don't know how to fix the economy because conservatism doesn't allow for it, right? In the they are all monetarists, right? They've all been gobbled up by the Milton Friedman demons of recent past.
Well, exactly.
And so the only actual solution, which is of course a Keynesian stimulus, right? Using the state to be able to direct some of the economy, having an industrial strategy, making sure that people can afford to live, is being hamstrung by the fact that literally every single person in the Conservative Party believes that we cannot spend any more money because it will stoke inflation, because it might increase the money supply. And this fixation that they have on, I think it's a dead form of economics, not even the IMF believes in anymore, right? Yeah. The woke IMF. That they said, well, there's nothing we can do with the economy because we don't believe that there is anything you can do without making it worse. And so they have to pivot to something else. Whereas obviously us on the left are going, well, you just spend more money, right? Yeah. Sovereign central bank, increase productive capacity.
Well, no, look, the
economy, right?
The M in IMF stands for Marxist, clearly, obviously.
True.
But you're quite right. It's essentially like a cult, basically. It's a kind of Friedmanist cult. And you can tell how it's a cult because a cult member cannot see past their own sort of ideological or delusional lens, and so when they're asked how do we solve this problem, their answer is always going to be more free market economics. But the problem is that the problem is free market economics. So you can't just, I mean, literally they are trying to tackle a fire with fucking gasoline. It cannot possibly begin to work. But they can't see past it. Their only answer ever is going to be cut taxes for rich people, cut the state. That's all they're going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Tax breaks for businesses to try and spur investment.
Job creators.
Because we have the lowest investment in the G7, right? So I think when Jeremy Hunt comes to us and says, I'm taking long-term decisions for the interest of the country, I think that he believes that because he believes that there is no alternative. Wonder who that's a quote from, right?
Thank you, Cupcake Chaos, for subscribing. 34 months. I mean,
Jesus.
Honestly, seek help. You are broken. But thank you nonetheless. Thank you. You can also give money to No Justice MTG in the form of bits.
Absolutely. There are 110 of you watching on YouTube. It is still 99p to become a member of people on YouTube. I highly recommend that you do. You get access to some excellent emotes, which I'm sure my current members will be demonstrating for you in the chat very promptly. You can also gift, if you're an existing member, you can also gift a bunch of memberships to your fellow grey named friends there as well.
Cool.
On that list of MPs that signed up for Gullis's amendment, the one that says we'll come out of the European Convention on Human Rights, we'll come out of the United Nations Refugee Convention, we'll come out of the United Nations Convention on Torture. There's another one, I can't remember. All of the ones that the Supreme Court yesterday had said, listen, even if we weren't in the ECHR, this would still be unlawful because Rwanda's not safe. It is not a safe place to send people. And some of the...
Oh, thank you, Arizal and David, North London. We're also on a hype train now. Everyone, if you want to give me bits and subs right now, get the hype train going. If we get to level 2 of the hype train, I will finger the corpse of Milton Friedman. I will do
Please
it.
Please do.
Okay? I've fingered so many dead people at this point. I'm surprised I'm not in jail. I'm a serial desecrator of the corpses of bad people. God. I wonder why I don't make partner. Crazy.
MPs that signed that. Bill Cash signed that. He's a constitutional historian. And someone I've noticed...
Yeah, but he's also a lunatic. What are you talking about? Again, yeah, because I think he's friends with Bill Cash's son or some shit, right? He's a posh kid He's just not. He's not a leftist. Just because he says some good thing, like he says Boris Johnson's a wanker, it's not enough.
Sounds great.
You know.
No.
Thank you, Why Would a Historian, for gifting a sub, and thank you to Arizolo Dave in North London with 200 bitty bits.
I was 13 years old. His son is one of my closest friends.
There you go.
You know, if his brains have been boiled by Brexit, then I don't know what the Tory party is anymore. Rishi
As per
Sunak doesn't
usual,
have
wear
any
a glove.
particular, he
Kitty
doesn't seem
Bob.
to have any
I
mission
love
or
the
any
Kitty
sense
Bob.
of purpose, except inventing new things to destroy, like meat taxes and 7 bins and then siding with Suella Braverman in an attack on the police. It's as if they're like a drunk in a pub car park, just desperately wheeling around looking for someone to fight
mean, not
with.
wrong.
So
Yeah,
I can't
it's
see
true.
a way back for them unless they put somebody like Cleverly's interesting. I think Cleverly's been very clever. Something he's not often accused of.
They call him Maguire, and the New Statesman calls him Not So.
Yes, and
Well, is James Cleverly update? We during PMQs we heard him call the town of Stockton a shithole. He claimed at first that he didn't say anything at all. That was bollocks. Then he said he didn't say it was a shithole. He said it's because you're a shit MP, and apologised for the unparliamentary language of saying shit. Now the thing is, shithole and the word hole and MP don't sound anything alike. So it's now being claimed that he did say it was shithole, but he said when he said shithole, he was referring to the MP. Now, who has ever called another person a shithole? That's not a thing you call a person. That's a place or like some sort of inanimate object, maybe, or literally a hole full of shit, whatever. Like
Did you see?
They're such awful liars. They're rubbish.
They really are terrible. Did you see the BBC Breakfast the day after he apologised? Finished off their broadcast with a couple of nice pictures of Stockton on Tees.
Well, they did. I saw a fantastic thing. The local council in Stockton put like here's some nice places in the town, and it was a lovely promo. And I was like, it looks fine. It looks like a nice little place, really.
It is nice. It's nice. Yeah. Well, it's not like amazing, right?
Oh
It's
yeah,
not-
look, I'm not looking at it in wonder like the fucking the halls of Versailles or something. Like it's
the sphere, like the Las Vegas sphere that we're missing out on.
Because
How dare you, Sadiq?
because Sadiq ruining the country with our lack of orbs.
and I don't think he is necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer intellectually, but cleverly he has done very little for the last year. He's kept his head down while the rest of them have been competing for headlines and competing for column inches and competing for the support of the membership, of course, by doing outrageous things. Badenoch started doing the trust trick of announcing utterly meaningless nonsense and claiming that it's A, brilliant, and B, something we could only do because of Brexit. You see the massive trade deal that was signed with Florida yesterday.
What's the value of that one?
Well, according to her, it's £1.3 trillion.
Naturally.
But according to economists, it's fuck all. I mean, literally nothing. Literally nothing.
Oh, really?
It's a memorandum of information, a memorandum of cooperation or something.
Actually, one story he tells in the book about the trade deal with Australia, when we gave up all the rights to the beef, if you remember that. Beef
Was that with
farming.
New Zealand?
No. Well, no. It was. I think it was Australia. I seem to recall. Yeah. I think we probably did the same thing with New Zealand at some point, but the
We
one
did, yes.
specifically.
New Zealand had a little. Someone showed me a broadcast of New Zealand news mocking Liz Truss for how shit the deal that she negotiated was.
Maybe it was New Zealand then. I don't
So
know.
it might be both. I'm like, oh, look, 'cause I know we definitely had a negotiation with Australia as well.
Maybe
but
it was. I
The
can't remember,
a New Zealand news broadcaster literally just said, "Well, they've done this deal with the UK. Don't know what they're getting out of it."
Well, yeah, because literally the point was they didn't. We just gave it up, and they
Yeah, we-
couldn't.
we-
They
we
said
can-
that
we can see-
the staff couldn't believe it to the point where they literally word for word wrote it down on a piece of paper, sent it to one of their like office staff, and said, "Type that up and print it out, and we'll get him to sign it tonight." Right, because they couldn't believe it.
yeah.
They went, if he shows this deal to any of his advisors, they'll tell him definitely don't. This is fucking ridiculous. So they go to sign it there and then that night because it was so unbelievably one-sided that they had to get it done there and then. And you're just like, fucking these. I mean, no offense to Australia and New Zealand, but countries that you would expect to have less robust negotiation power and all the rest of it, and fucking leverage, are just absolutely running rings around us, like the fucking Harlem Globetrotters of diplomacy.
Thing is, actually, thank you, non-binary and Simon Says in chat for pointing out that it was that we had a beef agreement with Australia and a lamb agreement with New Zealand.
Ah, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing is that they didn't care. They didn't care that the deal was bad. All they wanted to do was have an agreement signed so they could wave the piece of paper in front of the press the next day and go, look at this trade deal that we've signed. Aren't we progressing with our post-Brexit course?
You missed
so well.
You missed a great pun. So they could have the piece of paper and wave it and say, beef in our time.
Beef in our time.
Beef in our time. It's right there.
Also, speaking of deals with Australia, there's a really interesting story actually about Boris Johnson and his corruption.
Yeah.
That he had a mate, right? He has a mate who runs who bought out actually a bus making company in Northern Ireland, right? Off the back of this government contract that revived the company that was about to die, right? By giving them a government contract to produce hydrogen buses to be run in the UK.
Yeah.
And all of that hydrogen was going to be imported from Australia, right? As blue hydrogen. Because apparently that rather than just having just enough diesel buses that we need and expanding routes, right, I've got to replace all the existing ones with this new like hydrogen bus project. Except to be able to do that, you have to import hydrogen from the other side of the fucking planet.
Yeah, mad. Honest to God, we are run by some of the most incompetent. Like, I always thought that fascists had their shit together. Like, it operated properly. Right? Like, Hitler, I mean, he didn't really build the Autobahns, but, like, there was a structure in place. Fascist Italy worked as a place, at least initially, right? We've got the most incompetent... Look, we're going to go to the fucking death camps in a replacement bus service. Like, it's going to be it's a nightmare. We've got nothing. They're not even wearing Hugo Boss uniforms. It's fucking awful.
I'm sorry, that really tickled me being sent to the camps in replacement buses.
But you know what I mean? Because we haven't got any fucking trains that work.
Trains, yeah. Absolutely. It's like, unfortunately, we would take you to the death camps, but unfortunately, HS2 finishes at Birmingham.
Exactly. You're going to have to get on a fucking shuttle bus to Sheffield, yeah. Fuck me.
Oh dear.
Literally, what they've signed is a promise to have a chat. But it's page 2 of the Daily Mail. It's probably page 1 of the Express. I didn't check.
Sorry, actually, I'm going to do another joke
about
about that because, of course, obviously, famously, the trains ran on time in under Mussolini, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, unfortunately, we'll be waiting to be sent to the death camps. It'll be saying Northern Rail apologises for this late running and the inconvenience caused.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to be just these people huddling, starved on a train platform. With the 4th fucking cancellation that day, just go, oh, for fuck's sake!
I swear that Northern apologises for this late running and the inconvenience caused became their new slogan. Right, the amount of times I heard that phrase waiting around at Salford Central Station every day, because I got that train every day, and every day it was delayed, and I kept hearing that same announcement over and over and over.
Bilderberg
again.
nails it as well. The death camp's going to be run by G4S. Of course it is.
And Serco.
Yeah. Oh, God, you have to laugh. Otherwise, you're just going to cry. Fuck me. Oh.
To coin the phrase, playing politics on easy mode, to be able to sign a memorandum with Florida and say it's $1.3 trillion and then walk off merrily into the sunset, clapping and cheering, and to be applauded by the right-wing press, it boggles the mind that I can't... This talk of destruction, this talk of wipeout, that the Conservative Party will disappear or become something else, whatever it is, I find... hard to believe because the environment in which it exists is one that's generally supportive of it. It's one that fosters either characters like Badenoch, like Truss, like whoever the next person is that's going to come along and tank the economy. It tolerates them, it lifts them up, and so
It's not just toleration. Like literally, the day after Suella Braverman did her old fucking fascist shtick, literally the day she got fired, wasn't it? That the headline in the Daily Mail was. The country backed Braverman or something. Literally, that was they printed that obviously early because they have to get newspapers out, and by midday she was gone.
Yeah,
that right wing, like it's an echo chamber ecosystem thing is there to prop up cunts like that. How the fuck has Jacob Rees-Mogg ever gotten anywhere near the fucking government? Like there have always been those kind of posh inbred twats in the fucking backbenches of the Tory party, but they were always kept away from power. They were too embarrassing. Even for the Tory party of like the 60s and 70s, they were too embarrassing. They couldn't be in the fucking cabinet. They were like second Lord Earl of fucking Fauntleroy or whatever, but they would just be kept in the background and just they would be reliable votes because they could barely fucking read, so they didn't read the bills. They had no idea what was in them. But now he became fucking was it at one point Minister for Brexit Opportunities? Brilliant.
I love that you can just make up ministerial posts for whatever you want.
Just any old shit, Member for shining my fucking shoes, whatever, anything.
Minister for having a ministerial car.
True. And yet, we haven't got a minister for silly walks. It's an outrage.
Outrageous.
Actually, they will be wiped out in the way that some people are predicting.
Yeah, I am as well. Because you always got that 15 to 20% who... the only threat to that rump would come from the right. And I think that even sort of Farage and his mates are struggling now to portray themselves as being to the right of the Tory party because we saw him dancing with Priti Patel at the Conservative Party conference. So I used the word Faragification in the book to describe what's happened to the Tory party. And even as I was writing it 4 months ago, say, I thought, is that a bit strong? And then I saw him dancing.
What's interesting as well is that on some aspects, Reform UK aren't even actually just to the left of the Conservative Party.
In some ways,
and the Reform UK have a bunch of nationalisation policies in their in their manifesto, right? It's not sensible, right? They want to have like a 50-50 split, state ownership with private ownership. I don't know what it's all a mess. Oh, we're going to go over at some point in the future the Reform UK policy platform. It's very funny and well worth reading through just to see how like completely nonsensical it is.
Yeah.
But the broad thrust of it is that they want British people to own British industry, right? And that's their platform for nationalisation. And if they get popular, that's dangerous with a Labour Party that refuses to back those kind of things themselves. Yeah,
true. Actually, I did note this one quote down from the book about in Nigel Farage's description, or his description of Nigel Farage. It says he's like Nick Griffin, but quote adds a patina of professionalism via his spivs patter. I thought it was quite a nice, poetic way of describing Nigel Farage.
Definitely would agree.
This isn't a figure of speech, bopping with Priti Patel at the... So you think, no, I'm not. It's not an exaggeration at all. So how do you tack further right than a party Farage goes to? You know? So you've got that 15 to 20%. I don't know that they're going to attract much.
And again, Nigel Farage will portray himself as being on the outside whilst he's fucking partying with the former Home Secretary.
But he's on the out. Nella Rose said bad words about him on I'm a Celebrity, so that means you're on the outside of politics, even though you're an ex-investment banker and commodities broker who banked with an incredibly famous and posh bank until you were below the financial threshold for it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But he lost. But it was too woke. It was too woke.
Maybe he'll get bitten by a snake in the jungle and die.
That would be terrible. I really hope that doesn't happen.
That would be terrible. Well, much like your man, Chauvin, the guy who killed George Floyd. You hear he got stabbed in prison?
Terrible. Awful news.
Although I will say, he should have just complied, really, shouldn't he? He should have complied. He was no angel.
No angel.
And he probably had fentanyl in his system, so, you know.
Absolutely.
Much more than that, to be honest, unless Starmer has a nightmare. I described Starmer for the best part of a year now as carrying a Ming vase across an ice rink, and he's had a couple of stumbles lately, but the numbers don't seem to have been dented unduly. And I don't know who would look at the Tories now and think anybody whose vote is up for grabs, as opposed to the people whose vote is tattooed on their eyelids. I can't quite see it happening, but I still don't think we'll see wipeout.
I like that. The condescension from this posh cunt. People who have their votes tattooed on their eyelids. Like, yeah, some people have fucking principles. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry we can't be fucking bought by the promises of obvious charlatans. Fuck you. Just because you're fucking team red You fucking knob. Honestly,
And even
I've
then,
grown
like,
to really
we
dislike
aren't
it.
voting for them anymore because we aren't fixed in the things that we believe in, and therefore vote for what we believe in, which the Labour Party has left behind.
Yeah, well, in the general election, I'm voting for Joe Biden because it would be very funny.
Because a write-in candidate.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck it. Well, we don't even do write-in candidates. We're less democratic than America. It's ridiculous.
You know, 97 levels maybe, but no, it's not going. It can't go worse than that. And I wouldn't necessarily put money on it going as well as that for Labour at the moment.
This is why I see the stakes as being so high for Starmer, because I think you're right. The polling lead is there for all to see, and it's a very precarious job. And I think if he stewards it successfully over the next year, he'll be delivered with a majority. But from what I see and what I detect in the polling is that it's, broadly speaking, a dissatisfaction with Conservative rule rather than, a groundswell of enthusiasm for him, which I think makes that potentially large majority still very precarious. And without, let's say, delivering the change that people are crying out for, if people view that as unsatisfactory, I think he could be out within one term. And so I think the stakes are they're disproportionately high because he essentially has to deliver renewal, change, fix the ills with Britain. Very, very.
But he's not even promising that. He's not even pretending he's going to try and do that.
He has changed his tactic now, and he has said we want to deliver a decade of national renewal. Right? Okay, Brill, that's exactly what I want, Keir. I really wish any of your policies mirrored that lofty goal, because at the moment they don't. None of the policies do.
Indeed. Hello there, Tina 2 Raiderinos. How are we all? Everyone.
Hey, Tina 2 Raiders.
Go and follow Tina 2. Otherwise, I will. I won't really do anything about that, but I would like you to anyway.
Yeah, Tina_2 on Twitch.
Indeed, so I'm Kevin Logan.
POO.
Yes, not Tina 2, as in a person that's not Tina 1.
Yeah.
Indeed. Anyway, I'm Kevin Logan, leftist from the UK. You can hit the follow button here. You can subscribe. You can refresh the page so I get the algorithmic boost of your eyeballs. You should also go over and check out No Justice MTG. Don't worry, the MTG does not stand for Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's much worse. It's Magic the Gathering.
Magic the Gathering, yeah. On all platforms as well.
Exactly, on all of the various platforms. Hello there, Tina. How the fuck are you? What have you been up to other than being delightfully Canadian?
Very quickly, despite being emboldened, by a significant majority. And if he doesn't, he could well be out again because that support is hatred of the Tories.
Yeah, it wasn't that different in '97, but we forget. I think that a lot of the.
I think it's worth pointing out that support isn't just hatred for the Tories. It is, I want my mortgage to go down, right? I want my pension pot not to get screwed over. And that's where most of these votes come from, right? Like, people cannot trust the Tories with the economy. And that is the big differential here. It's not just this desire to see the Tories gone. It's, I do not trust them anymore with the money that I've invested in my property and in my pension, because these are the things that people vote the Conservative Party to protect. You look at the Southwest, that's why all these people are voting Lib Dem now. It's not because they just have this innate they feel the Tories are despicable, right? Those people already moved over during Partygate when the polls were 4 or 5 points ahead. But the Truss point where the polls massively diverged, it's always about the economy, right? It's always about the economy.
It's about the economy, stupid.
Indeed.
Support for Tony Blair for New Labour came from the collapse of the Tories. It came from really deep dissatisfaction with the sort of dog days of John Major's regime, and everyone was getting caught up in sleaze scandals and Europe and internecine warfare. So that is a plus, I suppose, if you're a Starmer supporter. And I don't know that he needs to be quite as radical as you describe, or quite as impactful as you describe, quite as quickly, because I think if he just creates an air of stability and consistency, then relief will get him quite far. Just that idea of
people need to see their material conditions improve. They need to stop being in a position where they're too poor to be able to live because of the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis.
No.
If he doesn't fix,
No, he just needs to be vibe. You just good vibes, and people will vote for
Good
him.
vibes, yeah, exactly. Haircut, toolmaker dad, let's go. Also, thank you, CG Man, for the super chat. You're an Indian living in the UK via skilled worker visa. You Indian residents have full voting rights in the UK Commonwealth. Cooper is far to the right. Look, our attack on skilled workers in the Telegraph. Oh yeah, we fucking hate Cooper on this stream. Be under no illusions that we despise people like Yvette Cooper.
Okay.
I mean, she's married to Ed Balls, who went to fucking George Osborne's wedding, right? Right,
Yeah.
the architect of hundreds of thousands of austerity deaths, and they share a podcast together, and very happy to rock up at his wedding.
Indeed, so. And welcome to Britain from India. Apologies
Absolutely.
that Narendra Modi is a fucking shithouse.
I mean, you escaped the fascism of Modi to be immediately welcomed with the fascism of our political establishment generally.
Well, you can tell how definitely not a fascist he is by the fact that the Cricket World Cup was played in the Narendra Modi Stadium.
Modi Stadium.
That's definitely not a megalomaniacal thing that a person who was currently in power would do. No, it's fine.
Well, I know what the Prime Minister stands for. Who could tell you what Rishi Sunak stands for? You know,
About 4 foot. Hey-oh.
He keeps wanging on about professionalism, accountability, and integrity, and then acts in precisely the opposite way that most of us understand those words to mean. So I hope, really, because stability is good. It's bad for business, but it's good for the country. And I think that might earn him more than we currently realise, because people perhaps don't realise just how unstable and crazy things. We've become normalised. We've become inured to how crazy things are. So when we get a reminder of what uncrazy looks like, we'll probably feel gratitude towards the geezer that's delivered it.
I suspect so, and
Also,
I hope so.
pause
I
one
think,
sec.
you know,
To LLL in chat, Star Wars' big message to the public is just identical to how the Dems ran in 2020. Vote slightly less shit liberal here to defeat insert right-wing freak here. It's more than that. It's actually more than that. Because Trump was basically the unique thing that Dems ran against and won on. I don't think it's the same in the UK, right? There's a reason why people like Rachel Reeves run on this stability platform, right? They're creating this nonsense idea of securonomics, for example. And they're explicitly courting the votes of middle class people who have assets that were screwed over by Liz Truss, right? They're explicitly saying we're going to be the rock of economic stability, and not just for these people too, but to be able to win over business interests as well, right? Because whereas Dems already had business interests in their pockets anyway, and to be fair, their monetary policy has been fine, right? Janet Yellen's been pretty good as Jerome Powell, has been pretty good as Treasury Secretary in keeping the labour market afloat in the US. There's no real difference on economic policy between the Dems and the Republicans broadly, outside of, the way that they view social security and stuff like that. Whereas because the Conservatives have completely demolished the economy for middle class people in the way that, the Trump actually never really did, that's why Labour's are trying to win over those voters, whereas the Democrats, all they had to do was just run somebody normal and say, look, we are not Trump, right?
And people aren't really scared of Rishi Sunak or despising Rishi Sunak in the same way that they would with Trump. He's not a person you can point to and go, look at this, crazy evil man.
Scary
Even though
man,
he is an evil man, he's just not. He's not the kind of grotesque figure that Trump is. So they can't just run that kind of campaign here. It does have to be something more. Look, if he could get away with it, I'm sure Starmer would be happy to just go, oh, look at this monstrous evil person, and run that way. Because anything to avoid having to actually tell the truth about his awful policies. But he can't, because it's not. Trump is a kind of weird one-off character in a way.
It's really and truly is that there's kind of a big difference between Trump and Johnson, in that Trump just had tax cuts and was still basically in thrall of the rest of the kind of business establishment of the Republican Party, whereas Boris Johnson was very famous for saying "fuck business," right?
Yes,
he was whether or not he cared to or not, and I believe that he didn't, right? He just wanted to be liked, so did policy that would make people like him. He was forced to run on a non-austerity platform because the Tories had lost loads of votes because Corbyn ran on an anti-austerity plan. He forced the Overton window to the left. And so Boris Johnson had to run on levelling up. He had to run on building new hospitals. He had to run on operating benefits, right? He couldn't be the George Osborne of the recent past. And the Tories don't realise this, right? If they'd kept with that kind of Johnsonian kind of mantra without him being at the centre of it, because he ruined a bunch of stuff by being, an awful person and a terrible prime minister, right?
Yeah.
They could have maintained this new kind of vanguard of Red Wall voters who believed in the Johnsonian playbook, right?
But again, it's just...
But they didn't.
It would be more difficult now, I think, because you can only sort of... you can fleece an animal many times, but you can only skin it once. Having lied, having done the economic populist thing, and then not even tried to deliver, it would be difficult to try and sell that same lie twice, I think.
True, and then also off the back of both Partygate and now the COVID inquiry, I think it would all have been done at the very least, right? But if they'd have put somebody who had not like similar vibes but the same kind of policies and would actually bother trying to achieve them, because these policies are ironically exactly what we need, right? We need more hospitals, right? We need more investment in tax credits for working people, right? We need all of this stuff on top of some level of nationalisation, right? Like we now have like a publicly owned rail company, because Johnson and Grant Shapps was Transport Secretary at the time realised that this whole privatised rail shit was never going to work. They're going to have to be renationalised at some point in the future because it's just failed miserably. And to a lesser extent, Johnson thought, well, the people behind his policy or behind his Robert Colville, I think, from the Centre for Policy Studies, wrote his manifesto or contributed to it. Realised we need to build more houses, right? This privatised rail stuff is just a massive failure. So they had to kind of massage it back into public discourse.
But you can't do a kind of overhaul of the privatisation that way without Murdoch going fucking crazy. So I think with the railways, I think it'll just be franchise by franchise, eventually being taken in house.
Yeah,
which will seem far less like socialism, Yeah,
because Northern Rail got their franchise taken away and was put under the franchise, the operator of last resort from the state, under Grant Shapps as Transport Secretary.
Yeah, Comrade Shapps doing his bit.
Yeah.
To your point about Sunak, he, I think his conference speech promises an end to the 30-year political consensus and then appoints David Cameron as Foreign Secretary.
It's surreal, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll come to Cameron. But just whilst we are talking about Blair, and I guess that 30-year political consensus that Sunak's referencing, no place for Blair in here, no place for Campbell either. And I think obviously a lot of people in Britain would suggest that New Labour have a lot to answer for about the way that modern British politics...
Here we go. Let's fucking...
I'm so glad that Ollie brought it around, because that's one of our big criticisms of this, right?
Yeah, exactly. 18 minutes of kind of tickling his balls. Now, fucking go for it. Let's have it.
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about political liars, right? Alistair Campbell did a lie far greater than anything any of the Tories done for the entirety of this period, right? The lie about the WMDs.
They're telling the truth about the 15-minute fucking weapons that were going to definitely rain down on London or something.
I mean, whether or not he was misinformed, right? I can't say whether he deliberately lied or not. Was it Chilcot decided that he might not have, but he might have been sharing information that he believed was true at the time, but turned out to be false. I don't want to libel myself, so I don't know whether he specifically lied or not, but there were no weapons of mass destruction. They were never found, right? And that was the basis of killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq.
Just because they were never found doesn't mean they're not there. It's like Jesus. It's only there if you believe he's there. Okay? Yeah, exactly.
Slid towards...
I mentioned Campbell. I do mention them both actually, but not
by chapter.
Not by chapter, and not to attack them. So I mentioned Blair believing that he had to cozy up to Murdoch, and Campbell actually is contrasted with the current merry-go-round of Mail and Murdoch journalists coming in and out of Downing Street as directors of communication and press officers, because Campbell was working for Today before he went to work for Tony Blair, and Today was owned by Rupert Murdoch. So, he's useful for that. I don't think the critique of Blair and Campbell goes beyond Iraq, personally.
at all. That's the only thing they did wrong.
No mention of PFIs, no mention of neoliberalism, no mention of the entire fucking financial sector who he was in bed with, that then destroyed the economy in 2008, right?
Yeah.
No mention of any of these things.
Yep.
Brilliant, love it, great. Adults in the room chat.
Yeah.
Just honest journalism coming from a man who does not indeed take a specific team here, and he's just completely agendalessly providing us with the facts.
Yeah, ridiculous. This is what I mean. That's why I brought up that quote from the introduction, because he literally just sees it as 2010 things got bad. Forgetting, of course,
exactly.
that, again, if Suella Braverman is a symptom and not a cause, Blair didn't come out of a vacuum. Cameron didn't come out of a vacuum. Johnson didn't come out of a vacuum. These things happen because of a fucking destruction, and not even just an alteration, which it would have had to eventually, but the destruction of the post-war consensus and the institution against the will of the British people, because it was never mentioned in either of the two fucking the first Thatcher manifesto doesn't mention privatisation at all. She talks about not increasing nationalisation, but she doesn't mention the word privatisation once. The institution of neoliberal economics on a country that had not voted for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Arid Track says Blair and Brown introduced a lot of great legislation for unions, right? Well, they didn't overturn any of the Thatcher union legislation. And actually, Blair and I think it was Mandelson as well in the background believed that the unions, the Labour should break away from the unions, and the union link undermined Labour as an electoral force. Yeah. Well, there may have been people who don't vote for Labour because of the links to the unions. That may be true, right? But so you're being sarcastic. Okay, it's difficult to get via text. That's fine. It's also privatised extra railways under Blair and Brown as well, and also Iraq isn't their only foreign policy failure. Afghanistan, right? Literally, Tony Blair said it's worth backing up Putin to fight against the common enemy of Islam.
Yep.
MI6 under Blair interfered with elections in Russia to make sure that the Communist Party didn't win. Now, I don't like the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Gennady Zyuganov is a fucking absolute maniac, and he's also kind of controlled opposition, right? But he's still not as bad as Vladimir fucking Putin at the time when he was committing war crimes in Chechnya. No less.
And obviously Iraq was a disaster in most measurable ways. If you approach analysis of it honestly, it's easy to understand how it happened. It's less easy to understand how there could have been no particular plan for the aftermath, although responsibility for that would lie chiefly with George W. Bush. Blair was there. He doesn't get a free pass on it. And
yeah, he does. Yes, he does. How the fuck can you possibly say these are the people that broke Britain and focus an entire chapter on Jeremy Corbyn, a man who was not Prime Minister, and leave out Tony Blair, a man who was?
I mean, you're Tony Blair literally, again, not just any Prime Minister, but Prime Minister for a decade, who fundamentally reshaped our political... The entire shape of British politics, where the Labour Party became a bourgeois party of fucking left liberal middle class people who were just happy to see their house price going up, and the fact that they were able to get onto the buy-to-let landlords, right? The buy-to-let mortgages skyrocketed during the Blair administration, right? That was the big era of buy-to-let landlords, which is the root of loads of parts of the housing crisis that screws over the working class people that Labour Party should be representing in government. And it does not. And Blair is like patient zero for the death of the Labour Party, right?
So in terms of trying to perhaps bully the media, Campbell would have a case to answer, but he would have seen that as his job. What I describe here is a cross-fertilisation of the media with the government. And that's very different. There'd have been no way that Rupert Murdoch executives were sending private messages to Tony Blair saying, I can't wait to work with you, which is what happened with David Cameron.
Right, but he was having weekly phone call conversations with Rupert Murdoch.
Well, so no, not just with Blair as well. Other members of the cabinet too. I don't know if I've told you this story before, but it's super important because Peter Oborne brought this up, right? On Charlie Brooker. Right. In the during the Blair administration, during the asylum seeker crisis, when there was all this discussion about Tanzania and shit like that, right? Because the Blair government were kind of not working as well on it, there were discussions behind the scenes between David Blunkett and people from the Sun to have a choreographed position where Labour agreed with the Sun that they could run like anti-asylum seeker adverts calling out the government, right? And then days later they would announce a new like crackdown on asylum seeker policy as part of this choreographed dance. Before all of this happened, it was all timetabled in their media rounds. The Sun would run this article, then Blunker would announce this new policy in response, right? They were literally that is manufacturing consent, like not even like implicitly, explicitly manufacturing consent between the two of them to do like a choreographed dance over how they would announce policy in league with the media. Like, that's exactly what Murdoch does with the Tories. And to ignore this kind of stuff, because Red Team Good is, again, as somebody who calls himself, I guess, a broadcaster rather than a journalist, even whose job it is to talk about politics and to be trying to present things in at least some way, a factual manner. So, we're just going to let Blair go for this. It's not like he's exactly the same. He is exactly the same as these people.
You have to say he's a journalist. He's not just a broadcaster. He's written, for a start, he's writing books. He used to host the fucking Newsnight. Like, he's a journalist.
Did he?
Yeah, do you not remember the brief stint he did about 6 months or something hosting the Newsnight?
No, I don't remember.
Left? And they had like a kind of, a rolling cast of dickheads doing it to try and see which one would rise to the top. And he was actually not too bad at it, but he eventually moved on and went to LBC, and the rest, as they say, is history. But he's very, very much a journalist, yeah.
And Rebecca Brooks. So I don't know, they weren't really contenders for chapters. And as I say, beyond Iraq,
but Jeremy Corbyn
I think
was.
the legacy is pretty solid. Actually, I think it's pretty healthy.
If we were to interrogate,
Honestly, you are a fucking prick. I don't know
my
how else
God.
to describe it, James. You are a twat. Mate.
This is absolutely just like the biggest. Like a microcosm of everything that's wrong with the media in this country, right? Because they're all Blairites, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like the vast majority of media in our country, they do describe themselves as left-wing. Like Matt Goodwin presented studies on these in his book about how most journalists consider themselves to be slightly left of centre. And Matt Goodwin used this as like evidence of the fact that must mean the woke establishment control our politics. Well, no, these people just don't understand what left-wing even means. Right? They think that left-wing is where you're slightly progressive on things, but you support Thatcherism, which is basically the Blairite position. They're all fucking Blairites. And there's like, his record is clean. I'm like, on top of everything that we've said already, they just think they can just slap a Sure Start sticker on the side of all of the failures of his governance, right? Yeah. Like the flex tape man from the advert.
Yes.
As if like just papers over all of the fucking heinous shit he did in government.
The PFI stuff. It just has gone completely unnoticed in all of this, apparently, even though that's fucked up the economy, or fucked up the public finances, which it was inevitably going to. You're just passing the buck. You're kicking the can down the road. And, of course, of the Jombly Combly concretes. The concrete situation, the rack. Where was that put up?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if there's one kind of high-level politician who can probably get away with this stuff, right? It's Gordon Brown. Like Gordon Brown had like the new towns plan. Gordon Brown had like the school re-improvement plan. Gordon Brown was one of the fiscal stimulus in like post 2008. He was a shitty chancellor, right? He was a great prime minister.
I wouldn't say a great prime minister, but he was okay.
I mean, a better prime minister, basically everybody that we've had since Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. But I can't forgive Brown for his selling out the Scottish people. Now, I didn't even really support independence during the referendum, but him going up there and essentially co-signing a lie from David Cameron about a white paper that couldn't possibly be published anywhere near as quickly as they were being told, you sold your soul. I can't forgive that. You sold the Scottish people down the river.
Yeah, that's true.
And that sucks.
Campbell a little bit, perhaps you would make the argument that the slide in trust between the Downing Street comms operation and the media perhaps can charter some of its foundation back to his time as the director of comms, that the distrust, the confrontation perhaps, and the nature of the professionalisation of the sort of the comms machine, if you like.
Yes, but I'd see that as a sort of finessing of tactics rather than a corruption of, everyone still agreed on what
the dossier, mate. The fucking dossier. That's a finessing.
Finessing him. Oh my God, that's the biggest euphemism I've ever heard. Right? That's so much hope. The copium is real.
It's embarrassing.
I'm sorry. Right?
That's
Like,
pathetic.
just to say,
That's a pathetic.
one is corruption, one's finessing.
Yeah, that's a pathetic evasion. That's shameful.
Absolutely pathetic, right? Absolutely pathetic.
A finessing. He told lies that got hundreds of thousands of people murdered.
Yeah. And not only that, and on top of that, right, we just also just have all of the other massive like failures of governance and foreign policy, like.
But finessing.
Me, I need to get around to drafting like the text for my New Labour was garbage and here's why video, because it needs to get done, because I'm so sick of people whitewashing the crimes of these people.
No, look, New Labour didn't do any crimes. They did finessing. Okay.
They did finesses, yeah.
They did some
it's only in a limited and specific way.
They did some finessing of the public finances. It's fine. I don't know what's your problem. Iraq was a bit of a blip, but other than that, the record is clean.
The rules of engagement were he just pushed them to the nth degree. This lot, when their own get caught out breaking the rules, like Owen Paterson did, they try and literally rip up the rule book. It's a different proposition. You know. Also, I don't know whether you find this, but if I meet people...
there's even more... I've just remembered two more scandals that massively implicated the Labour government. Then we remember cash for honours.
I do.
People like JOB, right, get mad, justifiably, of Boris Johnson putting his mates right into the House of Lords. Liz Truss trying to put Mark Littlewood into the House of Lords. People like that, right? Yeah. Tony Blair and the Labour ministry were taking money to put people in the House of Lords.
They
right?
were indeed, yes. Which, by the way, is not original. That's been happening forever, but it's still corrupt as fuck and illegal, technically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was literally a expenses scandal as well. That implicated loads of Labour MPs, right? Yeah. All had their fucking hands in the trough, didn't they?
A lot of them did. Some didn't. Like, let me just check. The man who broke Britain, Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. If even Jacob Rees-Mogg didn't have his hands in the coffers.
And also, I'll give him he's an awful human being in some ways, but George Galloway didn't claim any expenses as an MP.
Nope. Ever. Did not seem to claim a single penny in expenses. Nope.
Ever.
Did not.
Not a single shiny bronze penny ever. Yeah. Which is pretty based, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think George Galloway at the time, I think it was a real kind of tour de force. I think he's just had his I think he's one of those people who's been unjustifiably shut out of the political conversation for so long, and I think it's kind of melted his brain, unfortunately. Like, his persecution complex, which is, not unreasonable, has turned him into a real... Yeah, it's not gone well for him, has it?
Or he literally just turned into a cat. He's just so stupid, he's actually just sat there metaphorically licking his own arsehole.
Yeah.
I generally like them, so I try very hard not to meet people. You know, I with my podcast now, it's only people I want to spend time with. I won't interview politicians that I don't think I like, because I end up quite liking them. I like Alistair, so I don't know if I'm giving you honest answers to these questions or whether I'm sort of reverse engineering.
Yeah. Well, I remember on that point, watching Kathy Burke being interviewed, and she turned down something or other because Neil Hamilton was going to be in it. And she said, look, I'm a really nice fucking person. I'll end up fucking getting on with him and being his mate, and I don't want it because he's a massive cunt. So she turned the job down because he was going to be like a part of it. Some show on TV. Yeah. And it's true. There's an element of like they get humanised. It's difficult to be angry or sort of spout off about someone I think.
And if I'd never met the fella, maybe I'd be a lot more critical of him. But I really like him. So
that's really interesting.
Do you get that at all?
Yeah, totally.
It's because we're soppy, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a bit of that. I think it's one of the. Yes, I'm totally the same. I'm friends with very few politicians based on a personal level because I think it stops you from wielding the knife. Yeah. I don't like the nature of the Westminster kind of, oh, sorry, old chap, I did you over on the front page, but I'll buy you lunch tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly that. Especially not now when the stakes are so high and we've fallen so far. The idea that you will go for a drink together after you've done something that I consider...
You already admitted in this interview you are Bill Cash's son's best mate. Shut the fuck up, you chummy little fucking wanker. You lovey fucking Westminster bubble. I can't. I can't. For legal reasons, I'm going to leave that rant there. But he's a part of it. Again, it's how we broke Britain.
To be absolutely heinous, like misleading the late Queen about the proroguing of Parliament, or lying.
Yeah, but that was the funny bit. Why ever go with that was the best thing that Jacob Rees-Mogg ever did, was blatantly lie to the Queen's face.
Yeah.
I was with him on
and then
that one.
And then Liz Truss killed her.
Yeah, literally with her bare hands, metaphorically.
In the House of Commons in contempt, I find it. Yeah, I do. I find it absurd. I have this problem with Cleverly, who I just spoke warmly of a moment ago. As I sat next to him on the one-show sofa, and I liked him.
Yeah.
And therefore,
I was sat on the one-show sofa with him. You are a part of this. You're a lovey. You're
in the inner ring, James.
Yeah.
Right?
Fucking hell.
I mean, I've literally
Worry
I've literally watched him like attempt to pretend to scrutinise Keir Starmer, and then just not bother. Just like, oh, okay, I believe you, and then move on to the next question.
Well, he's just finessing the truth now. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. They finessed their way to the leadership of the Labour Party by lying to the membership of the Labour Party, having been given £700,000 of illicit money at Labour Together, which we now know the Electoral Commission investigated we found as being against electoral rules. Right, having finessed the Labour membership, they're finessing the country by pretending not to be shit.
And they finessed the number of people in the Labour Party as well.
Yeah, and they finessed all of the. They were finessing all of the selections for Blairite MPs that they're inserting. Finessing into the positions of prospective parliamentary candidates. Because you have to. What's the Liberal line? Oh, we have to make sure it's our democratic duty to present good candidates to the electorate. And of course, the Liberals are indeed the arbiters of what counts as good or not.
Yes.
Critiquing him through rose-tinted glasses. But I'm pretty sure that compared to Suella Braverman, Cleverly's all right, you know. But compared to Suella Braverman, I think that Genghis Khan was probably all right.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about Cleverly. He's one of the only Conservatives who's granted us extended interview time.
There you go,
with him.
you see.
I went and walked his dogs with him.
Yeah,
I went to the pub with him.
He's human, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm now sat here wondering the reason I think
we're
that about
finished.
him.
We're finished, Ollie.
He's got it. He's sussed it. He's sussed it. He's going to be the next Prime Minister.
Played us both like old pianos.
Okay, so you're right. Suella's out, Cleverly's replaced her, and David Cameron's in. And it's been heralded as the kind of return of, if you like, the sort of, the adults are back in the room, the kind of socially...
Oh, don't say it.
Killy Collie watches our streams.
Almost certainly, and also him using the phrase "adults back in the room," I would guess gave Jeremy Corbyn, gave James O'Brien at least a semi. Is what I'm gonna
Absolutely.
guess.
Liberal Conservative is back, and that's how Rishi Sunak will fight at the next election. Should we believe people who say that's the case?
Extraordinary. You could for 10 minutes. It's like when he said professionalism, accountability, and integrity, and you're so desperate for some relief from the Johnson Truss period that you think, oh, good, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And 6 hours later, he puts Braverman back in the Home Office 6 days after she's been fired for an egregious breach of national security that I think she has been very dishonest about subsequently. So, again, he sacks her, and you think, that's good, he's called time on the culture war. And then he makes Esther McVeigh Minister of Woke Finder General, but...
Common sense.
Woke Finder General, that's pretty good. We need to resurrect the monkey dust.
The monkey dust, yeah.
Please.
Sorry, but
by the
she's
power
got no
invested
power.
in me by
So,
some bloke I met in the pub.
Who knew for definite? I pronounce you two woke.
Woke.
With 30p Lee, their job is to shout at the clouds. Whereas Braverman had power. So when the Home Secretary is saying, let's confiscate tents from homeless people and find the charities that give them, and she's describing, grandmothers from Surbiton as hate marchers, and she's dreaming. The dreaming stuff was so weird, wasn't it? Dreaming of planes. It's my obsession.
Yeah.
That's different. So is he just putting those people in place to keep the sort of gammony wing quiet, and then going into the next general election, expecting to lose, but being able to look himself in the eye again and say, at least I fought it as me, as a socially liberal fiscal conservative? I don't know, actually, because then yesterday he announces this plan to change the law to establish that the moon is made of cheese or that the earth is actually flat. And you sort of think, well, so that adds to the theory that he just doesn't know whether he's coming or going from one day to the next. So it seems to me perfectly plausible that both things can be true at the same time. He does want to detach himself or distance himself from some of the craziest elements of the culture war, the so-called culture war, but at the same time he keeps getting dragged back into it by events, because if in danger, case of danger, break glass kind of thing for him. He can rile up, he get nice front pages from the...
Well, ultimately he's inadequate. He's not a person who should ever have been elevated to that position. As indeed shouldn't the last 5 prime ministers now, really. Yeah, that he's just inadequate to do the job, either as a politician or as a human being, as a public servant. He can't do it, and so he's getting pulled from pillar to post by the different factions. Most of the job, it seems, of prime minister is trying to hold a government together, and he can't.
I mean, definitely the Conservatives, yeah.
Papers that he needs the support of by giving them what they want, and what they want is the stuff he doesn't really want to be doing, perhaps.
And does David Cameron fit that mould of a moderate, of a centrist?
David Cameron's no centrist. This is a great kind of myth about... He looks a bit like a centrist because of the company that the Conservative Party has kept since he left, but it's a brilliant bit. It's not mine, it's an economist, and Emily Maitlis picked up on this on Twitter yesterday. I'd forgotten about it. And
oh, here we go. He's going to say it.
Yeah.
Maitlis, she knows what's what. She's been around the block.
No, well, clearly not. Clearly she doesn't know what's what, because she didn't know this before you pointed it out, when literally everybody who lives north of the Watford Gap knew this.
Also, as he points out, it's not from him. So it was pointed out to him, who pointed it out to Emily Maitlis.
Yeah,
which now
it's
means
like
there are at
Chinese
least
whispers of noticing.
Yeah, there are now 2 British journalists who understand a very basic socio-economic fact about the destruction of Britain. Thanks.
Yeah.
You really fucking helped.
It's like,
I found this...
It's like that bit in The Simpsons where it's like, Homer, are you still here? Boy, you are slow.
Yeah, true. When I stamp on your foot and tell you that the socio-economic damage to the north of England will force them to fucking vote for Brexit, I think he's talking to you.
To you.
Economist at Warwick University who had tracked the impact of austerity to the support for UKIP. And it's a hugely overlooked element of the last 10 years of British politics, possibly the last 13. But the more impacted a community was by austerity, the more this research demonstrates the people living there were likely to tack towards UKIP.
Wow, people who the status quo didn't serve weren't going to vote for the status quo. What a fucking shock.
Absolutely. Complete total shock. Absolutely. Couldn't believe it. I cannot believe it, right? Especially, I can't believe it, since the Labour Party undermined its own supporter base and its own historical supporters in those constituencies. Wow. What a fucking revelation. What a revelation.
Imagine my shock.
So Cameron delivered it. Cameron essentially, austerity delivered Brexit. Now, a lot of people think, oh, that's not new, but it's new to show it academically. It's new to bring quantitative or qualitative research to the table and show the links. It's a really brilliant piece of academic research, which some of the people responding to Emily didn't understand the point that she and the economists were making, which was not, oh my God, I had that opinion 10 years ago. Call yourself clever, bloody centrists. It was, wow, that's...
Okay, don't be ass blasted about it. You didn't know a thing. Chill. Fuck me. Look. All I'm going to say, James, is that you get the most expensive education known to man, and you didn't know a thing that a dumb cunt like me knew.
Yeah, but have you not considered, Kev, that the real problem is Jeremy Corbyn?
The real problem is Jeremy Corbyn and people being slightly rude to me and Emily Maitlis on Twitter.
It's on Twitter. Oh, and even then, it's not about, right? It's not about, the incredulity, right, or the fact that you don't know a thing, right? It's the fact that broadly the entirety of our political establishment didn't get this thing because these people thought austerity was necessary, right? They thought it was the only option because Britain had run out of money. They thought that the credit card had been run up, right? And then along comes somebody saying, well, actually, actually, it's an interesting point. When he talks about Cameron Osborne and austerity, Kev, does he ever mention the Reinhardt-Rogoff paper?
No.
No, of course he doesn't, right? Because he does not only like a surface analysis of this, which he's called austerity being bad, right? But the whole reason why austerity was done is there was this paper in 2010. I don't know if you know about this, Kev. Before
I'm vaguely aware of it, yes.
Yeah, what's just the chat who doesn't know? Called "Growth in the Time of Debt" by Carmen Reinhardt, and Kevin Rogoff. Or Ken Rogoff, sorry, two economists from the United States, that they basically made a prediction that once your debt to GDP ratio got above 30%, it negatively impacted growth. And once you're above like 60%, even more negatively impacted growth, right? And so their justification for austerity was based on the fact that our debt to GDP ratio is now over 30% because of the fiscal stimulus by Brown in the post-crash years. So austerity is the only option. We cannot continue spending our way to growth because we're now past this mythical number that's been pulled out of thin air by this paper that we've read. So we can only cut that down until we start growing again, which never happened. They continued increasing the debt to GDP ratio. But it turns out this paper had a fucking spreadsheet error that was spotted by a student of Carmen Reinhardt's at the university. So the entire paper was fucking bunk because of a spreadsheet error. So it was never a real thing. But this was just accepted as the narrative by the entirety of our political and media class. And the reason why we get angry is because they don't know, they don't live, they don't realise. They're all publicly educated. Actually, Mateless wasn't. She was state educated. But even so, these people who live in a different bubble, in a different world, in the Westminster bubble, were never on the grounds to realise what anybody who spoke to normal individuals who live in the real world actually knew through osmosis, essentially, from living in these communities, from experiencing real life, from bearing the brunt of austerity that people like Mateless and O'Brien never ever experienced.
Yeah.
The kind of experiment you need to do, that's the parameters of research you need to establish to do it. So he's no centrist. That ideology behind austerity was rank. You know, Alexei Sayle put it best. He described it as the idea that the global financial crisis of 2008 was caused by there being too many libraries in Wolverhampton. They couldn't wait to shut that shit down. They couldn't wait.
To be fair, the people of Wolverhampton can't read, so they don't need libraries.
I mean, you'll know.
Yeah, honestly, they're degenerate filth. Which, honestly, we should just pave over Wolverhampton.
It says somebody from 5 minutes down the road.
Well, exactly. I can smell them from here.
Take money out of the pockets of the people who were poorest already. They genuinely believe, because their lives have been so
exactly,
positive.
that's right. Fucking quoting a Corbyn supporter. What was the phrase he used earlier?
A dreamer, a student.
Dreamer. Yeah, dreamers and students, undergraduate idealism, delusional cultists. Yeah, Alexei Sayle, mate.
And so privileged that all you need to do to shake somebody out of unemployment.
What the fuck was that? Sorry, I nearly shat my fucking pants for a second there. I didn't even realise this was on. My tablet was telling me about something is not supported on this device, and I thought someone was behind me.
Professional broadcaster.
Switch off, you cunt. There you go. Apologies, everybody.
Is just, you know, hold their feet to the fire a bit or give them a bit of a kick up the backside, and it was horrible what austerity did, and so I don't think he's a centrist in that sense. I don't think he's a racist. He's probably a jingoist, but I don't see any benefit at all for Sunak from bringing him back, and I at the same time it's easy to see why David Cameron thinks that David Cameron would do a great job of being Foreign Secretary.
Is it fair to deny him the empathy to be able to see those circumstances, to see the suffering of other people and not engage with it and not do something about it? Because I often think this about Sunak. I often think, you know, silver spoon to the nth degree, can't use a credit card, heated swimming pool, all the rest of it. And part of me shies away from that and thinks, well, that's just, you know, that's who he is, and actually that should be irrelevant to your analysis of his politics.
Yes, of course.
then there's
Tony
another...
Benn was a Viscount, wasn't he?
Yeah,
You know.
well, or something else. I'm not entirely sure, James. But then again, these titles perhaps aren't necessarily the most relevant.
Been reading the Telegraph.
But the idea for me, I think it does have to have some relevance, because if you have not only have had no contact with the sharp end of your decision, but just can't even conceive of what it means or how it could impact people, I do think that is a problem.
You can if you try. I think you can conceive of it if you try. And they don't try. They don't even begin or seek to imagine what it would be like to run out of or rather to run out of money before you've run out of month, you know? And it's not very hard until it is. So but you can't have nothing.
But these people are dreamers, James.
Exactly. But they're not the only ones.
They're ideological cultists.
Exactly. Students.
Really nothing. So you hear people who do what we do on LBC and other presenters, and they can't believe that someone can't afford soap. Well, don't be ridiculous. It's only 50p. You go to Poundland and get but you haven't got 50p. And you look at the statistics on who's got £100.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, somebody in chat. Exactly, Mr. P and Ananda just putting it very bluntly. Austerity is horrible, but not so horrible that JOB would countenance a Corbyn-led Labour government. Exactly, 100%. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. So the reality, the concept of somebody having no money, it shouldn't be hard to understand. And if you are legislating for a country where a significant number of people are capable of having no money or who have no money, then you simply wouldn't pursue the policies that David Cameron and George Osborne and latterly Rishi Sunak have pursued. You just wouldn't.
Exactly. But I mean, my mind always goes back to, was it not last winter, the winter before, when there was the story of the homeless person who froze to death up against Parliament. They were literally outside, the sleeping rough, and froze to death in connection literally with that building. And they had like a minute's silence before the day's thing to, honour this person.
The thing is,
and then they pushed through more benefit cuts that were going to make more people
they did indeed. And speaking of those benefits cuts they pushed through, guess who said they would keep all of those cuts?
Well, presumably Jeremy Corbyn, because he destroyed the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was Ed Balls, right? It was Ed Balls and the Labour frontbench at the election in 2015 that they lost, right? Yep. And that Liz Kendall said she'd want to go further when she was running for leader. Liz Kendall was backed by the same people who backed Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney, and Labour together, right? They backed 4% Liz to try and do the same thing that they did to the Labour Party that they're doing now. And that he will say, well, Labour aren't the problem here; it's the Conservative Party problem. The Labour right have clean hands. So you're telling us that you can't believe that this ideology would happen, that Cameron Osborne did it. I'm like, well, okay, but then you've also got to somehow grapple with the fact that the opposition agreed.
Yeah.
Harriet Harman whipped to abstain on the welfare bill when she was interim leader. Like, these people are no better. Well, they may not be as bad, right? But they're still part of the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
You're trying to,
Yeah.
You couldn't. You wouldn't be able to. You'd be sort of psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually incapable of it. But if you never think about these concepts, if you never entertain the possibility that people need to use a food bank despite having a full-time job because the money is running out before the month is, and instead console yourself almost with the thought that they must be spending it all on Tenants Extra or White Lightning, or it used to be flat screen TVs. And there's a reason why that rhetoric bites so deep and stays so present in society. It's because people find it reassuring. So the politicians do it to sort of console themselves or to keep empathy at bay. And ordinary people suck it up because it helps them convince themselves that it couldn't happen to them. So I'm never going to run out of money because I'm not a feckless work-shy layabout. But actually, that's not the case. That's not true. You can run out of money even as you're going to work every day. I get calls on this. Some of them stay with me, and it's not necessarily the ones that you think would stay with you, like the obvious ones about people who are hungry or people who are sleeping in their car. They stay with me, but it's actually that there was a teacher's wife in Cromer, I think it was, in Norfolk. It was Cromer or Great Yarmouth. Okay? And she was talking to me about the children's indoor coats. the coats they wear indoors to keep warm. She was the wife of a teacher. And they wear coats indoors because it's so cold, but they can't wear their outdoor coats indoors because then when they go outside, the cold will be doubly biting. And that, to her, was just completely normal. And she's a teacher's wife. So they are a teacher's children. They're not the child of, someone who's spending all his money on...
Hey, it's Mixed Vivian Wolf. Hello, Mixed Vivian Wolf. Everyone go and follow
Hey, Viv.
Viv. Also, can you not do blood libel, please, Vivian, in my chat tonight? Because I know you're a big blood libeler. I don't know if you saw that particular piece of internet drama, but there is some Zionists who are fucking mental, is all I will say.
I mean, some.
Well, I mean, they're all a bit mental, but some of them are particularly
Extra.
Spicy.
Yeah.
on fags and booze. And I don't think that David Cameron knows that they exist. And I don't think that Rishi Sunak does either. And I don't get it. I don't understand why you want to go into politics, if not to help the people who most need help. And by help, I don't...
Well, if you go into politics in the Conservative Party, why the fuck would you think that they would want to help people? What is it remotely about the fucking the platform of the Conservatives that make you think they go into it for that reason?
I mean, like both Theresa May and Rory Stewart on the fucking shitty podcast that James O'Brien must assumedly love said that I can't think of anything more conservative than wanting to help the less fortunate. I'm like, how have you got that fucking impression out
That's
of,
the
history of the Conservative Party?
That's literally the opposite of conservatism.
You voted for this stuff. You voted for this in Parliament. You stood on a platform of implementing these fucking this democidal campaign of terror, right? Not only did you vote for it when you're in Parliament because you were bound to do it by the whips and by what platform you stood on, but you've stood on that platform in the first place, right? The nation tightening its belt, so to speak, was the explicit platform that you decided, I'm going to get elected on this at the election, and you've bound yourself to this poisonous democidal ideology, and that's the Conservative Party writ large. Like, how can you be so blind?
I don't mean quasi-charity or handouts. I just mean helping to create a society where people don't need to give their children indoor coats.
To use a quote, it's because they think they'd be quite good at it.
Cameron, why do you want to be Prime Minister? Because I think I'd be quite good at it. That chapter, very unexpectedly, was the one that enraged me most while I was writing it. Because, Farage, Cummings, Johnson, you'd expect them to be the ones that had me spitting nails. But it was actually Cameron because of that. Because of the arrogance married to the complacency and entitlement.
And that's the thing, right? He only knows that now. This is you could say, I think a lot of people would have looked at this and said, well, maybe he was actually also anti-austerity, but just had different priorities now. But the fact that he's only getting angry at Cameron in retrospect after he's writing the book, that shows you what the kind of world that he inhabits, that he lives in, right? It kind of just how little he thought about this at the time, that he's now surprised to be angry at David Cameron when, to me, he is literally the worst prime minister of all time. Like, and I thought that at the time. I'm a communist because of George Osborne. Nothing radicalised me more than living in Salford at the time of George Osborne's austerity cuts. Right? Nothing made me think that the system has to be torn down, has to be completely dismantled from the get-go, other than living in George Osborne's Britain. He's now only doing it in retrospect. And now he's the one saying, I can't believe all these other broadcasters couldn't fathom that other people were living in poverty. I'm like, I was fucking living it, right? I could see it in front of my eyes. I was buying old consumer electronics off of people whilst working at CEX, right? Who literally told me they couldn't afford to live if they didn't sell it back to me. That was radicalizing. And he's looking at it in retrospect 8 years later. Like, I'm sorry. It's just not good enough.
Yeah, we saw you from across the bar and we really like your vibe. Do you want to come back and... God, they're gross. Anyway, yes.
Let him treat the country as a sort of as an exercise in I don't know what he was doing, as if he was just, I'll have a go at oil painting, or I might take up the skateboard. I know, I'll have a go at being Prime Minister. And it's exactly how he's come back as Foreign Secretary this week, as if, oh-de-do-be-do-be-do, no harm done, I'll have a go at that now. I'm getting a bit bored. Foreign Secretary, splendid. Doesn't cross his mind how utterly detached that is from everybody else's concept of normal and consequences. The idea that you can screw up as spectacularly as he did, and in this ecosystem where right-wing media, right-wing politicians and bizarre lobby groups, secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, have created an ecosystem in which none of them bat an eyelid at David Cameron waltzing back in to Whitehall as Foreign Secretary.
To try to state the case for him, what do you think Rishi Sunak
That's why we
season?
voted for Jeremy Corbyn, and why you were too busy talking about Brexit betrayal and Holocaust. Oh my God, I hate it. Oh my God, it's infuriating.
Thank you, Brew and I don't know how to pronounce that fucking name, but thank you for joining. Welcome to the Kevolution. Yes.
I presumably there's a hope that having won elections and not being obviously mad might draw back some of the more moderate Conservatives, the ones we were talking about a moment ago, who are beyond the 15 to 20% rump that would be quite comfortable with a fascist government. People always forget that every country that's ever had a fascist government has a lot of people in it who are happy with a fascist government. So 15 to 20% of the country. So, or whatever that would be in percentage terms for the traditional support for the Tory party, that's no good for an election. If he's trying to limit damage or even still entertaining hopes of winning, he's going to have to start pulling people back from what we could loosely describe as the centre ground. And I guess that he thinks, and probably a lot of other people think, that David Cameron represents that. So sort of a bit of normalness. But he can't have it both ways. He can't be anointing David Cameron as normal while defending Lee Anderson's comments about the rule of law. So again, he's trying to have his cake and eat it and ending up with...
Again, you kind of have to as Tory leader, because there's so much mentalness. In order to try and keep that party together, you have to believe ridiculous nonsense. You have to hold obviously incompatible views at the same time.
The pain you
How
endure for us.
much do you see background in importing onto this? Because each of the four great offices of state is now inhabited by a public school boy. Do you see that feeding Cameron or Sunak's entitlement?
That's not exactly a new thing, but yeah, okay. Thank you, Belvoir Peef, with 501, presumably darts-based bitties. The pain you endure for us. Well, I also do it because it's kind of a kink thing, so you know.
I mean, it definitely does have some level of kind of
It's like self-flagellation.
Yeah. I do feel like we get a little bit of kind of vim out of this, yeah.
A little bit.
Entitlement.
I went to public school, and there are plenty of lads and young women, women who did and didn't turn into sociopaths, or didn't end up with an empathy bypass, or didn't suffer or don't suffer from what I just described as an inability to conceive of running out of money or of struggling to make ends meet. But there is a type, isn't there? There is a type, best described probably as people who were born 3-0 up and think they've scored a hat-trick. So they don't appreciate the privilege that they have enjoyed, the luck, the accident of birth, the serendipity that has they honestly think that they've got these prizes, these glittering prizes, through talent and hard work. Now, they might have talent and they might have worked hard, but if they'd been born to a single mother on a council estate in Birmingham or Sunderland or Glasgow...
Whoa, what's with the personal call-out?
Doing your bit.
What's happening there? Ridiculous.
They would not have the glittering. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't have had the... I don't understand how or why people find that so hard to acknowledge or so hard to accept. So yeah, I think that the top public schools, and this is something that only someone who went to a school like mine would ever dream of saying in public, the four schools that you're looking at they're very different schools. So Eton and Winchester, they would be creating men destined to go and run the empire. And there is a legacy of that. My school was a bit like that. This, albeit mine was a Catholic school, so it's a little more complicated. But the big old public schools, they were essentially creating men who were inculcated with a subconscious belief there was nothing odd, remarkable, or wrong about sailing to the other side of the world, lording it over the natives, and shipping back all the treasures and natural resources. That still exists. I had the most bizarre conversation with Chris de Burgh, who's a lovely man, and he was sitting in the front row.
Again, dude, you're not giving me like man of the people vibes with your. I was chatting with Chris de Burgh this one time, and we were talking about how Empire was bad or something. What the fuck is what? Jesus Christ.
Of a book festival that I did in Dorky in Ireland. He lives there. And I looked up, and first thing I thought was, that's Chris de bloody Burgh in the front row. I think it was just slightly unnerving, because he's a distinctive looking guy.
Absolutely. And
he started crying halfway through. And it was, because my last book was a lot about this type of schooling. And he came, and we became quite matey afterwards. And he said, at my school, I think he was at rugby school, they actually said, you're little soldiers of empire. He's that bit older than me. So they were still in the vocabulary, it was still in the argot of education to tell them that that's what they were, even though the empire was long gone. So I think that's really important. I think that these schools do, even if you're a doctor's son from Southampton rather than the grandson of a baronet from the home counties, you're getting the same messages, you're absorbing the same messages. And it is a born to rule mentality, which even then isn't necessarily bad. You could absorb a born to rule mentality and be brilliant at ruling. But if you're not brilliant,
that's you're a fucking twat, James. What are you talking about? Yeah, obviously you could be a great ruler, but having the innate I'm born to rule entitlement is bad in of itself. And also, just statistically, how many of those fucking kids are going to be great rulers? Not many. How many of them are going to end up in the fucking cabinet? Most of the cunts. It's not. Yeah. It's an awful idea. It's a tragic, awful idea, which it leads to a generation after generation of sociopathic monsters becoming very powerful, not just in government, but all of the CEOs, business, all of the fucking journalists, all of the main players of society are from that class of people. It's well worth pointing out as well, right?
It's always well worth pointing out as well is that he will have, for all of the reasons why this is bad, and you're correct that it's bad, James O'Brien will not ever point the finger. Look at what's happening to Labour right now. What should be the vehicle by which working class people have their own voice and seat in government, in Parliament as MPs, they are currently having their positions in that party completely removed by the internal Politburo of Starmer and co, replacing them with spads and mates and friends of the internal kind of party mechanism of Labour, as to do essentially the same thing, right?
Yeah. Well, he says
having the same amount of this entitlement to be the people who are politically involved, rather than there being a proper selection process, being kneecapped by the party to insert their own mates as part of this same fucking chums game. That James Brown were very quick to criticise the Conservative Party for doing this, but Labour get off scot-free.
Well, this is the thing in the Corbyn section of the book. He says that, quote, cultish followers went after centrists, saying that
if they're centrists, why are they in the Labour Party?
Centrists were purged, and that was a bad thing. And I just wanted to point out, look, when has he ever criticised the trot hunting?
Yeah, ever? Exactly. He's such a slimy fucker.
Criticised the fact that they're blatantly going in against the wishes of the local parties and installing, by diktat, council selections and MP selections.
Mm-hmm. And the same people who he's criticising from being in this entitlement background in the Conservative Party, these same people are the ones being earmarked for all of these positions, right? Chris Curtis, somebody who worked for fucking YouGov, being given a free run at Milton Keynes because they got rid of the trade unionist, right? Lauren Townsend, for being too left-wing, right? And bless her, I think she's great. Miata Farnbole, from another think tank, from the New Economics Foundation, being given a free run at Camberwell and Peckham because Maurice MacLeod, a councillor no less in the area, got removed from the shortlist for being too left-wing, right? So they're inserting their own people who they believe are the correct ones, who are from these privileged backgrounds that he's talking about, or at least who are from part of the sphere of influence of people like think tanks, like polling institutions, rather than genuine trade unionists or working class people. Not that Maurice MacLeod is, he's a broadcaster and a journalist, right? Or more of a journalist, I guess, but he's a nice guy, and I really appreciate his views, and he should have been given at least a chance to get voted on, right? This is the same process, the same level of chummery, the same level of a political class being unaccountable that James O'Brien will criticise in the Conservative Party. But the Labour Party, they just get away with that shit. And even then, he says all the centrists got purged. Where? Where did the centrists get purged? There was no purge. We were keep being told there would be a Stalinist purge. They never fucking materialized. It never happened, right? They will only ever bring up, right? They'll bring up specifically Jared O'Mara and Claudia Webb, right? That was a snap election. There's already in a snap election provisions for Labour HQ to implement candidates at short notice because otherwise the whole process would take too long, right? That's a fine thing. That's absolutely, not unreasonable to happen. And that's the only situation they can bring up is Jared O'Mara and Claudia Webb. Yet there's scores of people who've been hunted by the current Labour establishment. Will that cross James O'Brien's lips? It never will. Right? There wasn't a purge. It never happened. Yeah. Also, thank you, James, for the internet for the raid. You caught me mid-ran. Welcome, everyone. Please refresh your streams. I am No Justice. I am a socialist from the UK. I am streaming with Kevin Logan, who is also a socialist from the UK, who you must be well aware of at this point if you are a James from the internet viewer. But welcome, everybody. Please follow if you like UK politics.
Fuck you, James. And fuck your followers. Any of them that come over here will be perma-banned. Fact.
Ruling, but you think you're born to rule, then we've got...
I should point out for those who are hard of learning, that was a joke.
It was a joke. Well, what we're currently watching, UK broadcast journalist James O'Brien talk about how bad the Conservatives are whilst being throating Keir Starmer's knob at the same time.
Well, I was about to say, he's attacking the blue Conservatives whilst not attacking the red Conservatives.
Right, exactly, yeah. Red team good, blue team bad.
True. If you just pull the lever, the tram turns into red and it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. You can only watch.
Problem, because mediocre people end up with entitlement and believing that they could be prime ministers simply because they think they'd be quite good at it. Or Rishi Sunak has made all his money and got bored. So what does someone from my class and background do? If, I've made a pot of money before I'm 40, I know I'll go into politics.
Philanthropy.
Well, they could go into philanthropy, but I think you might be a bit allergic to that. So you end up with that weird sense of entitlement coupled with an absence of qualification. Whereas, I'm just trying to think who it is. So Sunak, Hunt went to Cheltenham, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it was possibly Harrow.
It wasn't Harrow.
I thank you, Nick the Peasant, for the £5. The chin-stroking, oh dear, isn't it ghastly middle class wankery of it all? Hero of the liberal soft left, for fuck's sake. Great stream as always, guys. Thank you very much for the super chat, Nick the Peasant. Much appreciated. If you are enjoying the content on YouTube, you can become a member for 99p or super chat yourself, or gift memberships to your fellow viewers. I still see some grey names in chat. It would be nice to be able to make those names green by gifting some memberships if you feel like you're able to. Never expected, they're always appreciated.
So that would fit as well, but cleverly,
you can give money to Kevin in chat as well.
One of the...
That's the thing you can also do if you're watching on Kevin's end. Yeah, please give us money.
Throw money at me in the street like I'm a Premier League referee.
Schools in Croydon, maybe Whitgift or somewhere like that. So he wouldn't have it in quite the same way. That's what I mean by saying you have to have gone to a school like mine. Gilly Cooper says, people who went to Harrow looked down on everyone who went to other public schools. People who went to Eton looked down on people who went to Harrow, and people who went to Ampleforth looked down on everybody. I went to Ampleforth, so I am qualified a bit to talk about this, even as I acknowledge how pant-wettingly ridiculous it is. It happens. It's real. It's not a...
And it's honestly, all of these, the class system is so entrenched. Leftist fucking... I don't know, vanguard is run by dickheads like this, and I say leftist obviously in inverted
liberal.
commas. the kind of resistance to. The
Well, even
Conservative
then,
Party.
even the people who are at the
but
kind of the
my-
head of the project, like the actual leftist project, right? Like James Snyder was chair of Momentum during the Corbyn years, and he's extremely well off, right?
Yeah.
From a very middle class background who went to private school. Like,
Yeah.
bless him. I think I think that he's good. And I
And it
think he's a
works.
good communicator. But even in our leftist project, like the upper echelons of it were full of people who also went to private school, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, it works on all sides as well, because my abiding memory of learning about the background of Nick Griffin was that he went to a minor public school and then was a Cambridge graduate. Nick Griffin,
Yeah.
fucking British Nazi boy. Even look, you can't have anything that isn't run by some fucking posh cunt. All of it.
Yeah, the
Every
class system
tiny
is
bit.
so entrenched, right? And that's why I'm a populist. This system has to be dismantled if you want to have real politics. Thank you for the 5 gifted MCH, much appreciated.
Yeah.
Coincidence that Eton has produced however many prime ministers it is, 18, 19, 20 prime ministers, because they leave that school, even a B stream, C stream student will leave that school thinking that he has every right in the world to run a FTSE 100 company or to be prime minister. And it's an incredible...
Well, you just made the point that that's okay, because some of them are probably going to be good at running stuff. But then there's loads of people like Boris Johnson who aren't.
Yeah.
Or David Cameron who aren't. Like, they're just...
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure... When was the last
Or
time
Rishi Sunak, he's not.
someone came out of Eton who wasn't a complete twat? Fucking... I don't even know. Orwell? Maybe? I'm not sure.
thing to buy for your children, and it can be a beautiful, wonderful thing, because it buys them keys to doors that other...
Oh, C stream. That's basically like I don't know if it in America you must have this, right, where each year is stratified based on attainment or whatever, right? So you have like the top level class and then the middle and then the bottom level
sets.
class. Yeah, sets or
Calling
whatever.
out.
Yeah. And in the private school system, they have these things called streams. So there's the A stream, B stream, C stream. So basically, C stream is like very average.
Each who get pissed on basically, which remember the clergy.
Yeah. So basically,
In his
even
Catholic school.
if you're a dumb fuck who went to Eton, you're going to come out of that thinking you can run the world, which is part of the fucking problem, of course.
Other people wouldn't even have the guts or the confidence to try. But there's a lot of people getting through those doors who shouldn't have been allowed into the building.
Yeah, perhaps it's nothing to do with Boris Johnson's purge of the Conservative Party. Perhaps it's nothing to do with Cameron's selection
Yes, we are all in the P stream. That is true. That is true.
procedures, and it has everything to do with the attitude inculcated in these people at these schools.
All of the above, I would say. I remember when Johnson got COVID, and Cameron said, "Don't worry."
Can we just point out, this needs to be repeated every time this COVID and Johnson get caught. He spoke to his advisors and suggested injecting himself with COVID live on television.
He asked his advisors if blowing a hair shower up his nose would cure COVID.
Well, that's just scientific illiteracy, right? That's just nonsense. But he wanted to give himself the deadly disease that, like, the corpses had been piling up in Italy by this point. This wasn't some unknown thing that he thought was just like the flu. He wanted to inject himself with a deadly disease on fucking live TV. Honestly, he's not just stupid. He's mental. He's actually fucking mental. I don't even know how to describe how strange that is to say. Fuck me.
Worry about Boris, he'll be fine. I've seen him play tennis. This is a fatal virus, right? But that's what we're taught at these schools.
Yep.
We're taught stiff upper lip. I had a PE teacher, he used to say, it's only pain, it doesn't really hurt. And we all thought he was great. You know, we're sort of hobbling around the rugby pitch with the frozen cowpats, which we used to fling at each other like frisbees. And we think it's character forming. But then when you're in emotional need, you're useless. Look at Johnson's empathy bypass when he was presented with statistics and came up with let the bodies pile high, or you know, there's no emotional literacy there at all, and that's a huge problem when a crisis arrives.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about crisis. Let's talk about Boris Johnson's attitude, denied till the cows came home, right? Let the bodies pile high. And it's been evidenced in the COVID inquiry that not only did he say that was actually broadly representative of the attitude of Downing Street. And we've seen Dominic Cummings back again testifying before a select committee. You singled him out for a chapter here. Run me through that process and run me through how you feel about him, because you describe him, he's possibly the character who receives the most glowing terms from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people would need to read the book to qualify that.
Yeah, I will say wouldn't say glowing terms. I think he suggests he's probably the most pure of intent, if that makes sense. Not that his intentions are pure, but that his intentions are always what he was going to do.
Right.
There's a certain kind of intellectual honesty to the evil that he does.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Which isn't glowing, but it's like almost damning with faint praise, I guess. But, I mean, even that's not really true, because the Castle Barnard thing was, like, obviously a lie. Like, really obviously silly.
It was so fucking funny.
It was pretty good, though. I mean, to have the balls to stand up and be like, yeah, I went on a 60-mile drive to test my fucking eyes. I mean,
we really were properly hypernormalization territory back then, weren't we?
I think there are better, less, or let's say, life endangering for you and everybody else in the fucking vicinity ways of testing your eyes.
By the way, I'd like to point out for Americans who've just tuned in from James from the Internet's raid, right? This is what political scandals were like in the UK. The scandals were the advisor to the Prime Minister broke the lockdown rules and lied about saying he had to test his eyesight to drive 100 miles to see a castle. This is that's what our scandals are like. Although to be fair, Boris Johnson wanting to inject himself with COVID is basically our version of the hydroxychloroquine thing. So
a little bit.
There are some parallels.
There are definitely the Johnson-Trump parallel isn't as weird or far off as it might seem, if that makes sense. There are definite parallels there, and they were both rich twats born in New York with bad hair. So.
Exactly.
There are similarities.
Small loans of $1 million, right?
Small loans of $1 million in the late 60s, when that was worth trillions.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I going to say? One of my favourite things was when Cummings complained about the way in which the press had treated him. Someone suggested to him that he should write to his MP, knowing that his MP was Jeremy Corbyn. He lives in Corbyn's constituency, which is quite nice.
Description, I think. Well, I tell you what, the thing about Cummings is that he wasn't in it for himself. Not in the traditional sense. He wasn't in it for money or status, or I think he wanted power, but he genuinely saw power as a means to an end. He saw Brexit as a means to an end. He really wants to burn everything down because he thinks he can rebuild it better. Now, that is clearly as mad as a box of snakes, but it's real. It's genuine. It's true.
He wants to burn everything to the ground, so he backed an old Etonian Oxbridge cunt to be Prime Minister.
I don't think Dominic Cummings is a little bit more calculated than just wanting to burn shit down, right?
Yeah, I think so. You couldn't win. I mean, to be fair, right? You have to, in a Machiavellian sense, admire the achievement of him and his people of taking a country that was fundamentally not in favour of leaving the European Union and winning that referendum. That's actually a remarkable thing. But you don't do that by wanting to burn shit to the ground. You have to be an organised political operative. You can't.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen because someone's fucking madman runs around and goes, "Oh, let's torch everything." No, he had a really well thought out plan of awful evil. Manipulation of information, stuff that was blatantly illegal that he should be in jail for, but. He made it happen because he was a calculated political operative.
He was indeed. Danny Boy DeGreat, in chat says, "What's the British equivalent of New York? Could it be London or perhaps another city, specifically Canary Wharf?" right? Specifically, Canary Wharf is the New York of London, because Canary Wharf is just all of the tall buildings in London, like Manhattan-style area, and then around it is loads of poor bits too, right? We have our little Queens just down the
London,
road from Canary Wharf.
yeah, London is a really odd place because obviously you have rich and poor everywhere in like big cities, but in London it's so closely
Stark.
packed together.
Yeah.
Like for instance, the Grenfell fire, that was in Islington, right? That was under the council of Kensington and Chelsea. Sorry, wasn't it?
Kensington and Chelsea, yeah.
Kensington and Chelsea, which is known as like a really high-end place. Kensington and Chelsea is where fucking Harrods is, right? Is in the borough of Kensington. So Kensington and Chelsea had a fire block made of hay and gasoline or whatever it was, filled with poor people and people recently arrived migrants and stuff like that, next to some of the richest motherfuckers in the world. Living in massive like mansions and shit, right next to each other. London's a really odd, like the juxtaposition in these areas is fucking mad.
That's why it's so easy for the riots to kick off, because these people were this relative poverty is something that causes a lot of societal instability, right? If you're a poor person living amongst a bunch of rich people, it's going to really knock your self-confidence a lot. So what's an interesting point, was really interesting anecdote from Frankie Boyle. He talks about this specifically when he was listening to grime records in his earlier years, and they would be rapping about the postcode E14, and that is the postcode that covers Canary Wharf specifically, right? Yeah, you don't see many grime rappers up in the towers of Canary Wharf.
No.
But this E14 postcode also included incredibly poor areas where young black men grew up, right? In London, and they were right next to each other, much in the same way that you had that similar levels of huge gaps in relative wealth, like this wealth gap between the poor and rich areas, between Manhattan and Queens, for example, in New York. That's why I think I would have made that specific comparison.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a pretty good one. In terms of its cultural influence, you would say probably London is, well, there's nowhere else in Britain that has that, so it would have to be London, would be the New York of Britain. But it's New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, like all together, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's basically it's the only great world city we have. And when I say great, I mean it in that old historic sense, powerful, important city that we actually have here.
Yeah, Birmingham is definitely our Detroit.
Quite literally, a former economic powerhouse industrial place that's. To quote one of my favourite YouTube videos ever, which was a fake Detroit tourism video that someone put together, and it was so sarcastic. It was like one of the things was a skyline of a part of Detroit with "Come and see our 3 buildings." Which is so on point for like the deindustrialization of these places in Detroit. Some of the places have been so depopulated because of the deindustrialization that they've literally got colonies of wild cats, to the point where the local government have put out specific warnings for people not to go to those areas because of the threat of being attacked by colonies of wild cats.
Sounds like Birmingham to me.
Nature has just taken back the area now because no one lives there. It's mind-blowing. Now, Birmingham isn't quite that bad, but it's bankrupt.
Exactly.
And Detroit went bankrupt. So there are some similarities. Yeah.
And both destroyed by neoliberal governments in the 80s.
Very much so. Actually, I hadn't even considered the brilliant comparison that Birmingham and Detroit have.
Danny Boy says you Googled Birmingham and it makes you look very modern. Okay, Google Digbeth. Digbeth.
Don't have a go at Digbeth. Digbeth's lovely in its own way. It's okay. It is also shit. To quote the current Home Secretary, it is a shithole. But to be fair, when you Google Digbeth, it only gives you like the nice bits. Yeah, the kind of lovely old pubs and the couple of little cafes and things. Yeah, the old railway workers' places that they've turned into fucking flats. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that seems to be a lot of the case in a lot of these lots of the deindustrialized towns. You'll get these old factory buildings that are converted into blocks of flats with the big windows, the big tall windows. Well, that's actually, you get a sense of that from the what do you call it, Train Spotting film. Well, films, I suppose.
Yeah.
There are two of them. The urban landscape of places that used to be industrialised areas. You've got a lot of the kind of former cotton mills next to canals that used to be a place, and they'll now turn them into like bougie fucking, loft apartments and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. Manchester, very same, like all the cotton mills in Manchester.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you can't build an economy on that. That isn't sustainable,
I mean, you can. You just have to sell all of these luxury flats to fucking Saudi businessmen and Russian oligarchs and let them appreciate in value, and that creates growth that's not benefiting anybody. But you can put the numbers.
That's what I mean.
You can put the numbers on your graph, and the red line will go up, and you'll say everybody's doing really well.
Yeah. Basically, America, anything outside of London is shit and should be knocked down and become wind farms. Well, thank you, Aerosol or Dave in North London. All I'll say is, when the inevitable sea rises happen and we on the Birmingham Plateau sit here in tropical paradise and watch London flood, I will specifically be thinking of you, okay? Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Also, speaking of things like this, well, KL Rooney in chat points out lots of old listed buildings that keep mysteriously, spontaneously combusting for some reason, and then being replaced by luxury flats. Yeah, it's weird how that happens, isn't it?
Well, they did that to the Crooked House, the pub in Worcestershire or somewhere. Yeah, they specifically did. Again, people should be going to jail. The trebuchet of justice, or whatever that poetic phrase would now be. People need to go to jail. If you're pumping shit into water, if you're burning down old buildings, if you're taking absolutely no care of the place, you should be going to jail, which would basically mean all of Parliament, except maybe a dozen of them, would also be going to jail.
Also worth pointing out, none of this was happening under Blair, apparently. Like, none of the things that we're talking about, the ills of deindustrialisation, Blair isn't to blame at all. Any of this, no. Heaven forfend should we blame Blair for any of this?
Well, all I'll say is, my father literally came to England to work in the Longbridge car plant, the Rover plant, which was shut by, let me just check, or not by, but under Tony Blair. Could have saved it. Could have spent money. They asked the government for £500 million over 25 years or whatever it was, which is a pittance. And it was a loan that would be paid back, in theory anyway, if the thing was successful. And they said, "Nah, fuck you," and let loads of people go. To the point where the penny pinchers on this did a forecast and actually forecast the number of suicides that would be caused by the mass layoffs. It was nearly 100 in the end.
Yeah, I mean, we could have nationalised it rather than having a loan, right?
Yeah,
it was state owned up until 1986.
But it was just Iraq. As if that
just a blip, right? Just a bit of a mess. They messed up once. Just because Blair messed up once, people start hating it.
Oh God, you've gone all Douglas Murray on us. You just messed up a couple of times. Fine, actually. Can't believe that. Douglas Murray is going to be one of the headline acts at the March Against Anti-Semitism. The guy who literally described Hitler mucking up. I'm sorry, that's not about anti-Semitism, is it then? You're just doing pro-Zionism. No. So go fuck yourselves.
Also, I want to point out, a young black economist, welcome, thank you for joining the chat. Everyone go follow them, they're great. It's young_black_economist, everyone who doesn't know, they do excellent streams. It's worth pointing out that in the UK, we don't really have zoning in terms of what homes that you can build where, in the same way that the United States does. But we do have is the Town and Country Planning Act, which is one of the things that's hampering house building somewhat at the moment, is that it's colloquially referred to as the green belt, where we have certain amount of city limits imposed upon where we can build or not based upon green spaces that we should have access to. And you know what? I think there's some reasonable things with this too. There are certain areas which are unused, are not greenfield, they're called brownfield sites, which could be developed into new housing but aren't being so. But we have our own little problems up
like Digbeth, basically.
Like Digbeth, basically, yeah, true. But deindustrialization has caused all of these old listed buildings to be sold off to be turned into flats, which is a real big problem. But another problem that we do have is that we need new towns. Our cities are failing to expand. And also what things we do have, because the state is refusing to build, like urban growth boundaries, So our state is refusing to build council housing, state-owned housing, like the projects in terms of American house building history, the supply is being so constrained that developers have realized that there's no point in developing when you know every single government policy will always tend towards ensuring that house prices increase ad infinitum, because you can't get people going into negative equity, especially not during a mortgage crisis, right? So we have long and short of it, the real solution is getting because we have a state-owned house building company. It's called Homes England. We could literally be building homes tomorrow if there was the will for the government to do so. There just isn't, and that's a big problem. And having high density within these urban growth limits, right, within the greenbelt, on brownfield sites, which are undeveloped areas that need some kind of refinement to do that.
Yeah.
But it requires the political will to do so.
Indeed. Also, hello, Radical Maniac. Everyone go and follow Radical Maniac immediately.
That is what he believes. And you can see him going mad now with frustration at the fact that that little tiny window of opportunity where he really could have done it. And perhaps if COVID hadn't come along, he would have taken a butcher's knife to the civil service. He could have done all sorts of things. You're really seeing that at the moment in his tweets, that frustration, because he's a failure. He even failed to get rid of Boris Johnson, but it was other people and other events that got rid of Boris Johnson. It wasn't Dominic Cummings's critiques or revelations. So there's two things that they represent, really. The normalisation of lying, the absolute normalisation of lying that was intrinsic to Brexit succeeding. And cometh the hour, cometh the man. You can say what you like about Boris Johnson. He is a brilliant liar. He is a world-class.
No. Just no. Again, I mentioned this 3 hours ago when we started. No.
Yeah, quality or quantity.
Exactly.
Liar. He is absolutely superb at lying. And Cummings kind of rode the tiger on that and paid the price, because he's sitting there while Johnson starts lying about life and death matters, starts lying about really important things. So there's an almost Greek tragedy to Cummings. There's a sort of hamartia and a hubris and not much catharsis as far as I can tell, but there's still a sort of Greek tragedy to him, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, there was no lying before Brexit happened. It's fine, actually. Blair, well, that's the thing. That's why he didn't bother mentioning Campbell in the book, really, because he never lied about anything, ever.
No, true.
Scrupulously honest.
Yeah, there's just those constant, if not lying, but at the very least disingenuity and scheming and corruption in the background all the way through that fucking New Labour period and before.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm not suggesting the PR people for previous governments were any good either, but Campbell was known as a complete fucking shyster, an arsehole.
He was. I think what's different about Boris Johnson isn't that he lied; it's that his lies were dumb. His lies lied about such stupid stuff.
Well, and I think there is a sort of pathological nature to his lying.
Yes, yeah,
he almost
true.
tell the truth. It's almost impossible for him.
It's very special in a way that his lies would he just couldn't stop himself, couldn't help himself from doing it.
He couldn't even tell the truth about the
calculated mistruth beforehand under the other prime ministers.
Yeah, like he literally would lie about the number of children he had. What the fuck? What kind of psychopathy do you have? You don't know how many kids you produce. I mean, to be fair, you need more than one hand to count the number, but still, come on.
Fascinating. Johnson is in many ways the least interesting character in the book because he's so transparent until you see him as the vessel for all the other stuff that has gone on. So as I was writing the book, getting near to the end of it, they announced that column in the Mail, and it was so perfectly symmetrical with what I was writing. I almost couldn't believe it because he's been completely destroyed by truth in the minds of anybody honest. There were no parties. All right, well, there were parties, but I knew nothing about. All right, there were parties. And
my favourite sentence ever, ambushed by cake.
Ambushed by cake.
Genius. Ambushed by cake is the greatest sentence any human has ever spoken. Certainly any government minister has spoken in straight-facedly in front of a fucking camera. Genius. It's artistic amounts of bollocks.
And again, for Americans who don't know, right? So Google Partygate for like the full story, but then we now have videos of people dancing in Number 10 at Christmas parties, whilst everybody else couldn't see their families at Christmas because it was against the law due to
And
lockdown rules.
even literally the Queen of England, now dead, lol, attending her husband's funeral was sat alone
On a pew.
because you couldn't be within
Wearing a
fucking
mask.
however many feet, wearing a mask indoors on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever the fucking rule was that day.
Well, there were
right?
funerals had limited numbers of people being allowed. People couldn't say goodbye to their dead relatives because they weren't allowed in the same room as the people who were dying. That's how strict our lockdown rules were in this country, and they were busy partying at Number 10. And in fact, the inquiry into it specifically said that it was like an ocean of normality, an oasis of normality. Number 10 was at the time.
Yeah, literally, they're having a fucking Mardi Gras there every fucking night. Literally, suitcases full of booze being fucking hauled into Downing Street while everyone else watching. And one of the excuses was that he didn't really attend the party; he was ambushed by cake.
Okay.
So someone,
This is a political again, just another example of how political scandal works in the UK.
yeah. We're a very serious country. We demand to be taken seriously.
And I did know about them, but I definitely didn't go to any. All right, there were parties, and I did know about them, and I did actually go to a few, but I didn't realise they were parties. They're just incredible, right? And yet normal again.
And the work meetings. Like, how many work meetings have fucking champagne laid on? What are you talking about?
There's actually a picture of him toasting in Number 10 during like the very first lockdown.
And he said it was a fucking work meeting.
Oh, and in the inquiry, when he was questioned by the select committee, right? By who was it? Was it Harry Harman?
Possibly, yeah.
I think it was Harriet Harman, and he was questioned by it. He said that I think we should have been rewarded for the hard work that we did in government during the pandemic by being allowed to celebrate every once in a while. He literally said that. Now that we know the work, because of the COVID inquiry, the work that they were doing was fucking abysmal, where they were literally saying, Rishi Sunak said he wanted to let people die, let the bodies pile out as a thing that was said.
Well, not even the maliciousness.
Opinion of Downing Street.
The awfulness of it, because literally Boris Johnson is quoted as having said, "We're so shit we can't get our act together."
Yeah.
He said that about his own government, the government that he was Prime Minister of.
During the select committee, he said should have been allowed to have.
Well, that's what private education buys you. It's not intelligence. It's not even really education. It's the bare balls of it to come out there and fucking say, you should be celebrating. You should be thanking me for this." You cheeky cunt. Look, honestly, get in the fucking bin.
We can sit here and chuckle about it. And then when he's found to be in contempt of Parliament, he responds by going further into contempt of Parliament. He commits a contempt of Parliament in response to the inquiry and the committee report into him being in contempt of Parliament. So by anything that you'd ever thought was British or normal or traditional, he's a pariah, right? He's profumo, working out the rest of his days with the homeless down on the embankment. Nope. He gets a £500,000 a year deal from the Daily Mail, and he gets a gig on one of these weird new television stations. They are rewarding proven disgrace. And so he's fascinating for that reason.
While talking about the weirdos on these new channels, did we see that old Tory boy Pierce got copped apparently for, let's say, sexual indiscretions, by which I mean assault? Being investigated. Technically not proven. Honestly, at this point, I think it would be quicker to list off the GB news presenters who weren't pervs or like
weren't part of a scandal involving that kind of stuff.
Some sort of sexual aggression against employees or whatever. Yeah.
As soon as Guido released it, I was like, I tweeted out that woman from Bristol in 2017. You're joking, not another one.
Yeah. Wondering if Britain had a pandemic plan. No, not really. Our plan was basically, let's just let people fucking die, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Which, to be fair, was a plan that we carried out perfectly. Okay? It was wonderful. We wanted to let people die, and fucking loads of people did die.
hundreds of thousands of people, on top of the hundreds of thousands of people died from austerity.
Honestly, the
If you
Luftwaffe...
total both, right? If you add together who the Tories killed because of austerity and who they killed because of the pandemic, it is more than the people who died in the Rwandan genocide.
Look, the Luftwaffe wishes it could have killed as many British people as the Tories have.
Yeah.
Okay? They could only have dreamt of such numbers.
Yeah.
He's fascinating as an exemplar of how rotten everything is. But there's no new stuff about Johnson. There's nothing there that people don't know already. It's just quite unnerving when you see it all in one place to realise that in some ways he's the embodiment of what Steve Bannon meant when he talked about flooding the zone with shit in the context of Trump. But in the context of Johnson, there is just so much, so many lies, so many disgraceful episodes, so many offences that would have ended any other career, and this bizarre combination of fake buffoonery and sociopathic self-interest combined to put the country on the way to hell in a handcart. There's one bit that is really interesting, because there's a well-known episode in Boris Johnson's career about very early on when he got onto the Times traineeship and wrote a story about the Rose Palace, which was Edward II's fancy house. And Johnson wrote a piece about, and he would have been quoting an esteemed academic saying, and he would have been running around with his catamite, whose name temporarily escapes me. It'll come to me.
Catamite is a rent boy, just for anyone wondering.
Just as soon as this interview finishes. And Piers Gaveston, there you go, Piers Gaveston, his catamite. And the academic quoted in the Times rings up the editor of the Times the next morning and says, we've got a bit of a problem. I didn't say that to Boris. And the reason why I know I didn't say that is because Piers Gaveston died 12 years before the Rose Palace was built. And the editor is like, okay. We've got another problem here, says the academic, because he's actually my godson, Boris Johnson. So most of that story is known, right? What I hadn't come across before, but what is absolutely, utterly illustrative of what Johnson is, who he is that he wasn't fired for that initially. He wrote another article in which he claimed that there was now academic dispute over the precise date upon which the Rose Palace had been built. So this is like bullshit on a level that is almost inconceivable to anybody with any understanding of what Fleet Street used to be like. And my father, to whom the book is dedicated, was a Daily Telegraph journalist when working for the Daily Telegraph was something to be proud of and something to aspire to, something to dream of as a young journalist. And so my dad was on Fleet Street at the time.
I mean, the fact that he thinks that was ever a thing.
Yeah, mad. The paper that supported the Tories through the fucking... through the 50s, 60s, 70s. Just imagine all of the rank empire shit and the fucking support of various awful things. But he's a fucking posh
Yeah,
boy.
but things only went wrong since 2010, though, Kev. Right?
Exactly.
Politics started in 2010.
Literally.
Here that you could sit in the office of the Times, the paper of record, the Thunderer, and write something that was beyond bollocks and deliver it to the news editor and watch it go into the paper and not feel any qualm of conscience, any kind of guilt, shame, just seeing it, well, I'll probably get away with it if I get this idea out there.
That's what I mean. He was posh enough to get away with that shit. A working class lad gets fired. Well, he wouldn't have got the job in the first place, but he gets fired for that.
Yeah.
No, my godfather can jog on, and I think it was that second article that did for him. And yet the official version of events ends with the first article, and he gave an interview a few years later to the Express and Star in Wolverhampton where he talked about that being
Again, fucking Wolverhampton. Jesus.
his worst mistake. It's not a mistake. It's not a mistake to make shit up. It's a lie, and that's who he always was. That was the first step into public life that Boris Johnson ever took, and it was defined by utter dishonesty.
Mate.
It reminds me of the
shameless
Eddie Mair
dishonesty.
interview. It reminds me of the Eddie Mair interview where he's just like, "Why did you make up a quote?" And then also, why did you conspire to have a journalist beaten up? Yes, that's a thing that happened,
Yep.
which people just forget about when he when he was campaigning to be prime minister. Labour didn't even go after him for it.
Well, thank God he didn't eat a bacon sandwich. Weird. Sorry,
True,
sausage
true.
sandwich, whatever.
Or
the fuck it
drive a Chairman Mao style bicycle.
was. True. And he can bow at the right angle, so it's all
True,
good.
true.
It's all good.
Maybe the mistake was his judgment call that he'd be able to get away with it. Maybe that's what he was referring to. I'd like to pick you up on something else you said earlier on in your answer about Britain and Boris Johnson offending everything, sort of the sensibility of the country, or perhaps what it embodies. And I guess the entire premise of the book, right, is that these people, these characters are...
I have to say I'm disappointed he hasn't asked about Corbyn a bit.
I mean, we've got 6 minutes left, so still time.
Okay, but if he's just going to tack it on at the end, my criticism stands. But, okay.
are oppositional to our idea of what Britain is, should or could be.
I think so.
And I'd like to ask you to kind of paint or illustrate what that idea of the country is. What is it that these people are so different from? Does it actually exist?
Yeah, I think I'm quite naive. I think I'm quite naive, and I think I'm quite...
You
For an
think?
old man, a middle-aged man, I'm quite idealistic still, because I don't buy the sort of jolly hockey sticks school of Britain, but I think that we were a country where reputation mattered, where honour was something that people valued, and these are dishonourable people.
There's definitely been no dishonourable politicians at all who you definitely got held accountable for that. It's not like we, destroyed enemy retreating warships in the 80s didn't become a political scandal, did it?
No.
You got questioned about it on like a call-in show on TV about the Belgrano, but
Yeah.
that's it.
Also, Crunchy Asparagus in chat. Stop being a bellend, will you, mate? Like... sometimes we talk about Russia, Ukraine. Sometimes we talk about Israel. Yeah, I presume you're a right winger because of the stupidity here. You realise that's how news works, right? Like a story happens, and then another story happens, and then a different story. It's called the passage of time.
It's like that meme with the Wojak having like the chip taken out of their back of the head and then put in again, right? And it's just like October the 28th, October the 29th.
It's news. Different things happen. Move on with your life.
People, most obviously.
So should we still be talking about the repeal of the Corn Laws? Like, how far back do we go?
Relation with simple truth. That these are people who, like Kellyanne Conway and Donald Trump, want to make their own truth. They are people who have subverted observable reality for personal ambition and pursuit of wealth and power, or both. And that, I don't think, is very British, which might make me sound like an idiot. But, we're all...
Little bit.
All consequences of our own circumstances, aren't we? We're all a result of background and upbringing. And I thought people didn't do such blatantly disgusting things, and if they did and they got caught, then they slink away in shame, and that really does make me sound naive. So that for me is what I mean by breaking Britain, or even if
think of the colonial crimes that Britain was engaged in when this guy was at his private school. So you get the idea that you're influenced by your upbringing and your background, James, but you don't seem to understand that has done that with you and your concept of what Britishness means. Because I assure you, kids from my background did not think about Britain as being this grand fucking place where dignity mattered and a man's standing and blah. That's bollocks. No one lives that way. This is not the fucking 1700s and you're a pre-Victorian gent trotting around the fucking place. What world are you living in? This isn't the England of 2023 or even 1973. It's nonsense.
If you want to get a little less emotional, the notion of playing a game against an opponent who you don't like or who you disagree with very passionately. But one thing you can agree on is the rules of the game. You know, you want to use a sporting analogy.
Yeah, when the rules suit you. That, like, the rules that you like were the ones that you win with. Because the game is rigged for your class to win.
It is a set of rules and regulations that we all abide by. So I'm going to try and kick the bejesus out of you when we're on the pitch, but I'm not going to pick up the ball and run with it in a game of football. You know, I'm not going to do a William Webb-Ella. I'm not going to completely change the rules and then lie about it, because if you do that, then nothing matters. Winning doesn't count. You haven't won if you've cheated, really. Even if you end up with an 80-seat majority, if it's built on lies, everybody loses ultimately. If you achieve Brexit by lying, or by weaponising jingoism, or by terrifying people about non-existent threats from Polish lorry drivers, these aren't meaningful victories. They're hollow victories.
Okay, but there was a guy who wanted to change this. There was a guy who offered you an alternative, and you smeared him as a communist and an anti-Semite.
Yes, you said he was going to open collective farms. I was all working on collective farms. Holocaust denial and Brexit betrayal.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Of course, Blair's nothing wrong though.
No,
apart from the blip of Iraq.
Yeah, a little bit of a cheeky little Iraq situation.
A cheeky war crime.
Just
but then again, to be fair, at least he
finessing
waited
some international law.
Yeah, at least he waited until he was in power to abet war crimes. Unlike war crimer who's done it before he's even got into power.
Exactly, he's more efficiently evil, which is why he should be prime minister and not be criticised ever.
Yeah.
That ultimately haunt a population, because the truth will always come out in the end, and there always seemed to be an understanding of that in politics. Even if, you know, a politician, a prime minister did something or held positions that you found abhorrent or repellent, they were sincerely held positions based, they felt, upon observable evidence. When we moved into a space in 2016 where, I remember when Gove said it out loud, didn't he? When he said that the country's had enough of experts. He added from organisations with strange acronyms, by which he meant things like the IMF, you know, which is a international lender of last resort. If your economy goes tits up, it's the IMF who come to your rescue. They came to our rescue in the 70s, so it's just mad.
And they never ask for anything in return. It's always no strings attached, interest-free. They're just there to help poor countries, honest.
Yeah, they've never ever debt-trapped any country in the global south. No, siree.
They are benevolence itself, really, when you think about it, in no way.
Saying stuff that you know subverts the truth, subverts reality, and then celebrating when you win. I think that's what I mean when I talk about one of the many things that has broken. It's that relationship between truth, or that relationship between reality and politics.
Speaking of which, we'll be watching I'm a Celebrity.
I mean, in fact, obviously you're referring to Farage going on it, and that is really, again, evidence of stuff I write about in the book. They've been very kind to the world, improving almost every point I make in the book. That COVID inquiry came.
To be fair, it has been timed extraordinarily well, with Braverman going and this fucking Farage in the jungle. Like, he's been getting a lot of free advertisement for his point, I guess.
Yeah.
And for his book.
The week it was published, and proved everything I said about Cummings and Johnson, and Priti Patel and Farage start dancing at conference and prove everything I say about Farage. And the main point of that chapter is that he's Nick Griffin. You know, when Nick Griffin went on Question Time, we all had a fit of the vapours, but Nick Griffin looked a bit weird and wasn't very clubbable. Whereas Farage, I think of them as two karaoke singers with exactly the same backing track, exactly the same song, and exactly the same microphone, but one of them can sing and one of them can't. Farage is just really good at this stuff. He's really good at appearing amenable and appearing likeable while peddling really toxic Enoch Powell-lite tribute acts. And he has done it so well that he's segueing now into light entertainment. And there are very few people who come out of I'm a Celebrity with their reputation tarnished. Most people come out. Even Matt Hancock temporarily enjoyed a boost to his reputation after going into the jungle. The only one I can ever think of for whom it went really badly was the woman that used to inspect people's poo, Gillian McKeith, the one who did the faint. But I don't think anyone ever heard.
I think George Galloway didn't do well out of his Big Brother experience, to be honest.
I don't know. I mean,
should I be the cat? Yeah, it's a bit. It's good memes, but I'm not sure it worked out well for his career. But
no, potentially not.
Yeah, but it's so odd that Farage goes on "I'm a Celebrity." Like, I mean, I don't know, like Hermann Goering doing "Dancing on Ice" or something. What the fuck what's going on here? Very odd. And I'm going to continue my boycott of it since the very first show it ever happened till now. So, take that, ITV.
Heard of her afterwards. So, I mean, it's what my life is really for the last few years. It's like, here I am being proved right again. Bloody hell, I wish I was wrong. So I suspect it will go quite well for him.
I don't know whether I should wish you a few more happy years of predicting things right, or hope that you start getting them wrong, James.
I'd love to get things wrong.
Oh, come on, Ollie. Come on, Ollie. We can. That I don't think he is. He is worthy of your praise.
You don't need to work the shaft that hard. You really don't.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Come on.
About everything in the book,
he was predicting this so well. It took him 8 years to realise austerity was bad.
James O'Brien, thank you so much.
Ollie, thank you.
Anyway, you get the idea. That was tortuous. Is what that
it was. I mean, we got loads of good points in there. There's so much to discuss. He's so wrong, and so he's not so wrong. He's so close to the point, and then becoming really wrong on top of it.
Exactly.
But it gave us loads to discuss. So
it's really annoying that he gets, like you say, he gets so close to the truth, and then veers away so fucking sharply to some weird other thing. Oh god, it's annoying. And they didn't even talk about Corbyn at all. So I'm glad I mentioned the bits that I made notes on.
I mean, was it? Did he just essentially say? I mean, the Corbyn let Brexit. I'm assuming the Corbyn chapter was brought Corbyn let Brexit happen.
Yeah.
The people who supported him were idiots, student politics, activists, dreamers, whatever.
And he was a big old terrorist, big old anti-Semitic terrorist.
And did he literally say that?
Well, not literally terrorist, but he said he was like hang on. Do I have the exact
terrorist
quote?
synthesizer?
Defenders anti-Semitic. Corbyn compares him to Trump. Apparently, I don't remember that specific bit.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ!
I don't have any exact quotes on that, but yeah, he definitely said he was like he's friends with Hamas and all that shit. The typical stuff, the typical smears.
No. Did he talk about the Chairman Mao bicycle?
I don't think he did. No, because again, he was part of that smearing. He was part of the way in which Britain was destroyed. Okay, we've been going for a bit, but should we get through this David Pakman thing because it's only 40 odd seconds?
Let's do it, yeah.
And I feel like it's clippable for a bit for you because I don't know. If you can get anything out of that.
Yeah. And also, crunchy asparagus will get what they wish.
What's that?
To talk about Israel.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, crunchy asparagus. Who I just told to fuck off in chat. I think because they're annoying me. Like, don't go into someone else's fucking chat and demand that they talk about the thing that you want to talk about. Right?
If
you want to talk about it, do your own fucking stream and talk about it. There's a title. I'll talk about the thing I want to talk about. Or I suppose we, because it's a dual stream. But yeah. Okay. Oh, let me just get a drink ready. Because I am thirsty. Don't forget, you can give both of us money. That's an option you can. Available to
Please do. We've been going for 3.5 hours.
Exactly. This is honestly, it's like working down a coal mine streaming. It's like that really and defusing a bomb and doing heart surgery all at once.
Okay, so what does it James O'Brien compared himself to as a broadcast journalist?
Oh, I can't
like a builder or some shit.
I can't remember, but he's a pretentious wanker. Like, I do a joke because this isn't really a job. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. Anyway, so David Pakman.
David Pakman.
David Pakman, who is honestly, I mean, he's always been a fucking lib, but his foreign policy takes have been a bit weird in recent times. His take on the coup in Bolivia, if you remember, he was like super okay with that, which was a bit left field and a bit fucking weird, considering it was like a Christian fascist that was taking over from a democratically elected leftoid. So, you know, not ideal. And he's claimed in the past that he is not a Zionist, right? But I do have to wonder, if you're not a Zionist, why would you think that Joe Biden has done a good job on Israel?
Yeah.
It's a bit like, you can make the claim, but if your actions don't match that claim, I do have to, well, call bullshit.
Yeah.
I see all the same reports that you see. Young people displeased with Biden over handling.
Firstly, let's not bury the lead here. That shit stash it's a poor choice.
It's not great, is it? Also, thank you for the 100 bits, Peach Wolf, and thank you for the £10, Andrew Luke.
It's a choice was made.
Choice was made.
A bad choice was made. Anyway.
Handling of Israeli-Hamas war, so on and so forth. Disaster for Biden in 2024. First and foremost,
I don't think people are saying disaster in 2024. It's just saying the cohort within the electorate that is most likely to vote for him are going to be put off by this.
Also, to be fair, actually, on a lot of these people who would be put off, all just living in blue states anyway.
Not necessarily, and it's not so much. It doesn't matter the people who are in either very strongly blue or red states. It's that there are going to be a lot of younger people in those purple states. Mixed states.
Yeah. That's the real clincher, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Zuma's put him over the line in 2020.
Yeah. You got to bear in mind, places like Arizona were won by like 20,000 votes. Now you could easily lose 20,000 young votes with this Israel-Palestine shit, and you got to bear in mind he came within an ace of losing that election, actually, on the Electoral College. Now, in terms of the popular vote, as always, the Republicans are dog shit. Because just like the Tories here, they stack the deck in their favour.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, he could definitely lose a state or two on the basis of this. It's not that it's going to be a disaster or he'll lose like a 50-state landslide to Trump, because that's not going to happen. But he could definitely get fucked over by this.
Yeah.
Foremost, you're telling me that those people who don't feel Biden has done enough are going to vote for Donald Trump?
No, just that they won't vote, or they'll vote third party.
Cornel West, yeah.
Spoil their ballot or whatever, yeah. Like, they don't have to vote for Donald Trump. Again, it's 20,000 votes in Arizona, and it was like 40,000 in Wisconsin. Like, they just have to not turn up, because I'm not voting for a guy who's cool with like genocide.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Genocide Joe isn't getting my vote. Neither's Genocide Donald, but so what? That doesn't. The electoral mathematics doesn't necessarily mean they have to vote for Trump.
Like, you're looking at a ballot paper that has pro-genocide Trump, pro-genocide Biden, pro-genocide Kennedy, and anti-genocide West, and you're like, well, my choice has kind of been made for me at that point.
Yeah.
Now, ironically, I actually think you probably should still vote for Joe Biden, as much as it fucking pains me to say it.
Well,
miserable.
I made the announcement yesterday. I will be voting for Joe Biden in all 50 states. Yeah. Through Smartmatic voting machines, we're going to be voting in all 50 states, and we're going to invent a 51st state just so I can vote in that one as well.
It's worth 300 electoral votes on its own.
Exactly.
I'll be just an election of us two voting for Biden.
Exactly.
I think you probably should, just because I think Trump being in power might lead by the end of the world. Like the negative utility of the potential Trump win by not voting for Biden is so much worse, right, than the potential negative utility of maybe for some reason Green voters let Rishi Sunak back into number 10. It was not happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, the consequence of the world of Trump being the next president is just unthinkable, especially when you think of like relationships with China, when you've got foreign policy in the Middle East, when you've got the internal like labor market policies, which Biden's been mercifully good on. Like, it's just like climate change, you don't believe it exists. the consequences of another Trump presidency are just so apocalyptically bad. Like we were lucky that we only got it as bad as we did the first time round, and it's really on a tear to try and make it even worse this time. Like I think you really have to unfortunately suck it up for Genocide Joe, which really makes me so fucking miserable that I have to say that. But there's no reason for vote this time, man.
Yeah. Also, you don't need to shout in chat, Maria. We get the point. We understand the point of voting for the lesser of two evils, etc., etc. I'm not suggesting that these people shouldn't vote for him. I'm just suggesting that the electoral mathematics, as was being poorly outlined by David here, they don't need to vote for Trump. They just need not to vote for them to have an
100%.
impact. You know.
They've made their choice to not support genocide, Joe, right? And if he wants their votes back, he's gonna have to stop supporting genocide. Like it's super simple.
Yep.
It's a really simple conundrum. But then again, the electoral maths would go, well, there are plenty of pro-genocide voters in the country.
Unfortunately, there are a lot. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, there are
yeah.
people who are very, very okay with that. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, first and foremost. Secondly, it is actually remarkable the amount of success that Joe Biden has had here, pushing Israelis to allow aid into Gaza.
What? What now? What? Are you joking? Is this a bit? Are you doing an act now? Joe Biden has been successful in forcing them to bring in 2 bottles of water and a cigarette lighter's worth of gas. Mm-hmm. What are you talking about? What would a lack of success be then? Honestly, what would failure look like if this is success?
Yeah.
Literally,
we know how much power like the US president has to stop people doing what they do, right?
Yeah.
Was it who was it? Menachem Begin, who was Israeli prime minister, who just got told by Ronald Reagan to stop and then stopped immediately, right? In Lebanon, was it?
Yeah, because you literally, I mean, look, Israel, you are essentially a kept bitch, okay? America keeps you. You are bought and
much
paid
the same way they
for.
keep us as well.
In a less, our defence is slightly less reliant on them in the sense that we can defend ourselves to a degree. They don't fund an Iron Dome to prevent France from launching rockets or something. So literally, without America, Israel fucking collapses. So, if America wanted to, they could just say, "Look, we want to carry on giving you all this money and funding the Iron Dome and all the rest of it, and for your citizens to have public health care whilst ours don't. Lol. But can you stop doing the genocide? Actually, literally stop doing the genocide. 2-state solution. Bing bang boom. Bob's your uncle." Right? But they're not going to do that. Even Biden is rhetorically probably the most or the least anti-Palestinian, if that's the right phrasing of it, of any president, certainly of my lifetime. And he's still pro-genocide.
Maybe Clinton might have been slightly better because he was literally there at the peace accords.
Okay. I guess. Let's say of the 20... Well, technically...
But I mean, it's definitely Democrats that are like that, though, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, the Republicans are just like, oh, yeah, I don't think they're genociding hard enough.
No, literally, we had a Republican in the fucking House on the floor give a speech about how they should be genociding even harder.
Exactly. Yeah, you're a bunch of pussies. You've only killed how many thousand? You could have killed way more. The fuck is wrong with you?
Those are rookie numbers. You got to pump those numbers up.
Exactly.
Warning Israel, don't overplay your hand, getting involved in the negotiation for hostage release, and that is major. That is tangible.
Well, it is tangible, but I wouldn't say it's major. It's a 4-day stop.
It would be major. It would be major if there wasn't already precedent for this. But there was already plenty of mediations happen in previous hostage swaps, right?
Yeah.
There was no world where any US president was not going to get involved in hostage negotiations.
Yeah, especially because some of them are US citizens as well. So you'd kind of expect them to have an interest in the release, at least of the American ones. Although, did you see there were 10 of them from Thailand or something? What the fuck? What were you doing? Well, no, I mean, you can't go anywhere, but specifically just in the south of of Israel. There were loads of Thai people. Okay. Just slightly odd. Geographic peccadillo.
And that is major. And meanwhile, Fox News is talking about Biden's age. I see all the same.
I mean, he is old as fuck. Like, there's no doubt they're going to... Whoever wins the next election is going to end up being the oldest president ever. Just by dint of the fact that they're both in their 80s.
Oh god, it's so depressing, isn't it?
Look, can the boomers... Look, you've had your moment, by which I mean the last fucking 50 years. Can you stop? Can you actually
Yes,
stop?
and get replaced by fucking Pete Buttigieg. Yay! Woo!
Or
Love it.
AOC.
Or AOC. Like, so I mean, that's never happening though, is it? We got it.
Not with that kind of attitude. No.
No, it's not. What's the nickname leftists gave to Pete Buttigieg?
Mayo Pete.
Mayo.
Which is a play on Mayor Pete, because he was mayor of a place called South Bend, Indiana.
South Bend.
So you just
South. So he's Mayo Pete. He's also gay, so you could call it like South Bend, I guess, but that'd be a bit insulting.
That would be enormously homophobic, actually. Yes,
it would be. But I'm one of the gays, so I have.
So you're allowed to be homophobic. That is how it works. You get
also, like,
you get the F
crunchy,
pass, so to speak.
Also, crunchy asparagus. How on earth is Trump better than Biden? Do you want to go to economic war with China? Like, come on, please.
No, he wants to go to actual war with China.
Actual war with China.
Yeah.
Come on. Be serious. At least, like the mediation that you get from Sanders being like around and like the oppressions on of the Dems being in power, like that's what you get, right? And Sanders has been very clear about the need to establish further ongoing economic negotiations with China. And Jinping himself has said, right? Like, I don't think you got to take a gigantic pinch of salt with anything that the premier of China says, but he says he wants to normalize economic relationships with the United States as well, and that economic interreliance is how you prevent future wars happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doing
Biden
this weird
is the one that
trade
escalates war with China.
shit.
Like, are you fucking mental, crunchy asparagus? What the fuck are you talking about?
Isn't the criticism of Joe Biden that he's like too weak with China? Not that he's
Exactly,
going to go
that's
to
the
war
main
with them.
criticism, and he's been seen as being weak with China because he has people in his office, people like Sanders, who are trying to push him to normalize economic relations.
Yeah, which, by the way, was the thing that the American presidents were doing in the fucking 70s. Like, this is not something that needs to be weird or controversial. Now, don't get me wrong. The Chinese government are fucking scum. But considering that America does deals happily with Saudi Arabia and various other fucking dictatorships and brutal oppressors of their people, China's no different in that regard. In fact, they're actually slightly better than some of the others. But, why would you want to make an enemy out of what is soon going to be the economic superpower of Earth?
Well, I think there's loads of people. I think there's a lot of like leftoids who want that to happen because they want there to be this like nouveau Cold War type shit, right?
Yeah.
They want China and America to be enemies because they think it'll get them closer to a multipolar world when it just doesn't. It just is the closest to nuclear war.
Yeah, indeed. So, crunchy asparagus, consider yourself fucking served, mate.
Absolutely.
Done. Anyway, I think we're done here.
I believe so. You decide who we raid. I keep choosing for us both, but
well, that's because ladies' prerogative. I don't fucking know.
yes.
Who is going? Rhizome's going, but he's got plenty of peeps there. Which maybe
We could cloud chase. We could cloud chase with Rhizome.
Yeah, fuck it. Let's go then. So you're a bad influence. You're a bad influence.
Absolutely. And I'm going to, and also YouTube viewers, I'll send you into President Sunday.
I still don't. Someone did tell me the other day I had to do that, but I can't remember.
Edit, customization, live redirect.
See, I've already forgotten. Apologies. Rhizome. How the fuck do you spell his name? What?
RHYZOHM.
There he is. Fuck me dead. Right. Go over to Rhizome to pronounce it wrongly, like Hassan did that one time. And
oh, sorry, I'm currently in a bit of a 2-minute ad break for some reason for Rhizome. Just bear with us 1 second. Jesus. Why does it add so long to get into his stream? Anyway, I'm going to leave YouTuber viewers. I'll leave you with President Sunday for the moment.
Okay. Go live. Hang on. What do I do?
So it's you go to edit in the top right,
Edit.
next to your chat, customization.
Redirect. Add.
Yeah.
Who do I... Videos from people you're... No, just... Oh, here we
Videos
go.
from other channels.
Ah,
the
here
second,
we
the
go.
second, the
Yeah,
column on the
okay.
right. And then you...
So
President Sunday, some Caffles is in the title, is the thing I rated into.
Yeah, we've got TYT. That's not happening. TYT is the only one that are live right now. I'm not raiding into that.
No, I rated into, like, President Sunday's going live in 15 minutes, so I rated into his pre-stream.
I can't even see him on my thing. Is it unsubscribed me from him? I don't know. Anyway, YouTube.
If you just search President Sunday, right, share your screen, you should be able to find it.
No, fuck it. I can't be bothered. YouTube, just go to bed. It's fine.
No,
Stop watching YouTube. It's bad for you. I'll give you AIDS or something. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Thank you all for listening and watching. Everyone, go follow No Justice MTG. See you later.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.